Chapter 2046. The Sword Sect quickly took control of Bajou. The entire Bajou was now under the control of the Sword Sect. At this time, Xiaoqun arrived at Bahuang City, accompanied by Zhou Song and Wu Huan. The Sword Sect quickly took control of Bajou. The entire Bajou was now under the control of the Sword Sect. At this time, Xiaoqun arrived at Bahuang City, accompanied by Zhou Song and Wu Huan. As the largest city in Bajou, Bahuang City wasn't far from the former Black Emperor sect. With Xiaoqun's arrival, Song Xing naturally led the three major forces out of the city to meet him. The Chen clan head, Wang clan head, and Filius sect head stood respectfully behind Song Xing. They all had nervous expressions on their faces. It couldn't be helped. The three of them knew who the big shot was. He was in existence above Song Xing. Although Xiaoqun's cultivation was far inferior to Song Xing's, Xiaoqun's status was above Song Xing's. It could be said that Xiaoqun could decide their life and death with a single word. They anxiously waited for Xiaoqun's arrival. Not long after, Xiaoqun flew over from afar and slowly landed outside the city gate. When Song Xing saw Xiaoqun, he took the initiative to greet him. "Greetings, sect head." In response to Song Xing's greeting, Xiaoqun smiled and personally helped him up. "This time, it's all thanks to Vice Sect Head. You did well." It could be said that Xiaoqun trusted Song Xing the most. Like Zhou Song and Wu Huan, Xiaoqun firmly believed that Song Xing would never betray the Sword Sect under any circumstances. In response to Xiaoqun's praise, Song Xing was extremely humble. Then, Song Xing introduced the three Chen clan heads to Xiaoqun. Facing Xiaoqun, the three of them were a little nervous. They repeatedly cupped their hands and bowed. Their attitude was extremely humble. Facing the three nervous Chen clan heads, Xiaoqun didn't say much. He only said, "In the future, do your job well. Don't have any thoughts that you shouldn't have. The Sword Sect won't mistreat you." It was a word of encouragement and also a word of warning. Hearing this, the three of them repeatedly nodded in agreement. Then, the group walked into Tyrant Emperor City. Tyrant Emperor City was indeed worthy of being the largest city in Tyrant Province. As the situation in Tyrant Emperor City gradually stabilized, the city slowly became lively. It seemed like a flourishing age. Xiaoqun was also very satisfied with Tyrant Emperor City. This city had a history of over 10 million years. Now that the Sword Sect had taken over Tyrant Province and taken over Tyrant Emperor City without any casualties, it was indeed a perfect ending. Otherwise, it would be a pity if such a large city was destroyed in the chaos of war. As usual, they arrived at the Chen clan residence. The Chen clan head had arranged accommodations for Xiaoqun and the others. Xiaoqun planned to stay in Tyrant Emperor City for the night before heading to the Black Emperor sect tomorrow. After a silent night, early the next morning, Xiaoqun led Song Xing and the other two out of Tyrant Emperor City and rushed towards the Black Emperor sect. As for the others, they remained in Tyrant Emperor City. The Black Emperor sect used to be the center of the entire Tyrant Province. It was also the true ruler of the Tyrant Province. However, it was now empty. Although looking from afar, there was still a great number of bejeweled buildings. When one truly approached, one would discover that the entire Black Emperor sect was already empty. The surroundings were quiet, and it looked a little desolate. Instead of flying directly, Xiaoqun chose to walk up the mountain. Along the way, the Black Emperor sect that should have been bustling with life was now a desolate place. As he walked, Xiaoqun sighed with emotion. This He Sui is somewhat of an exception. The Black Emperor sect has been operating for so many years, and he gave it up just like that. There were probably not many people like He Sui. After all, not everyone could give up their own sect and start anew in a brand new place. Hearing Xiaoqun's words, Song Xing nodded slightly and continued, "Indeed, but in the face of life and death, the Black Emperor sect has no choice." Song Xing's words were not false. If the Black Emperor sect did not leave and gave up the Tyrant Province, the Sword Sect would sooner or later take action against the Black Emperor Sect. There was no doubt about this. Very quickly, the group arrived at the Black Emperor Sect's Great Hall. They strolled around the Great Hall, then went to the Black Emperor Sect's treasury and other important places, such as the Martial Skill Hall, the Spiritual Medicine Garden, and so on. Just as Shao Chun had thought, the Black Emperor Sect did not leave anything behind. Not even a single low-grade spiritual grass was left behind. Shao Chun had already guessed this, so he was not too disappointed in the face of such an outcome. After all, in order to evacuate the Tyrant Province, the Black Emperor Sect was clearly fully prepared. As a result, how could the Black Emperor Sect leave their cultivation resources to the Sword Sect? Not only were the various cultivation resources and martial skills destroyed by the Black Emperor Sect, even the cultivation secret realms that could not be taken away were destroyed by the Black Emperor Sect. They would rather destroy it than leave it to the Sword Sect. The Black Emperor Sect had indeed done it. At the very least, after staying in the Black Emperor Sect for a while, Shao Chun did not find anything valuable. They really moved everything clean. After a fruitless search, Wu Huan muttered in displeasure. Hearing Wu Huan's words, Zhou Song, who was at the side, replied, "It would be strange if the Black Emperor Sect left anything behind for us. It's probably because the Tyrant Province is not easy to deal with. Otherwise, the Black Emperor Sect would probably destroy the entire Tyrant Province." Everything was as expected. Currently, there was nothing valuable in the Black Emperor Sect's mountain gate. While Shao Chen's group searched the Black Emperor Sect to no avail and the Sword Sect took control of the Tyrant Province, in the Heavenly Gate's Great Hall in the Tianzhou. Of course, Tao Ming had also heard about the Black Emperor Sect's retreat and the Swords Gate's control over the Ba Prefecture. He was shocked to hear that the Swords Gate had obtained another prefecture, which meant that the Swords Gate now had 3 prefectures under their control. Facing livid, Tao Ming's mood could be said to be extremely gloomy as he sat on the main seat. The Sword Sect's development was getting better and better, and the threat that the Heavenly Gate faced was getting greater and greater. Especially after the previous 2 battles, the 2 sides could almost be said to be irreconcilable. If the Sword Sect really matured, the Heavenly Gate would probably be the first target of the Sword Sect. Tao Ming's desire to destroy the Sword Sect had not changed at all. However, with the Moon Palace and the Dragon Palace around, it would be difficult for the Heavenly Gate to succeed. This was what made Tao Ming most aggrieved and angry. He had to think of a way to resolve the interference of the Dragon Palace and the Moon Palace. During this period, Tao Ming had been thinking. Although the Heavenly Gate did not seem to have done anything on the surface, in fact, the Heavenly Gate's desire to kill the Sword Sect had not weakened at all. "Sword Sect, I will destroy you no matter what the price is," Tao Ming said fiercely as he sat on the main seat. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2047. Tao Ming's evil intentions towards Swords Gate were still unquenchable. But no matter how unwilling he was and how much he wanted to annihilate Swords Gate was still growing stronger and stronger. Tao Ming still had not given up on the Sword Sect. Even though he was extremely unwilling and wanted to destroy the Sword Sect all the time, the Sword Sect was becoming more and more powerful. Especially after obtaining Bazhou, the Sword Sect had already occupied 3 prefectures. Furthermore, Bazhou was one of the major prefectures in the Great Thousand World. Not only was it vast, but it was also extremely rich. With Bazhou, it could provide the Sword Sect with a considerable amount of resources every year. Within a short period of time, Heavenly Sect did not seem to have the ability to continue restricting the development of the Sword Sect. The main reason for this was the Moon Palace and the Dragon Palace. If they did not get rid of them first, Heavenly Sect would not be able to do anything to the Sword Sect. However, it was impossible for Heavenly Sect to get rid of the Moon Palace and the Dragon Palace alone. This was why Tao Ming was so distraught. Oblivious to the fact that Tao Ming was still eyeing the Swords Gate, Xiao Chun and the others went to the Black Emperor's sect and searched around. However, they did not find anything of value and returned to the Tyrant Emperor's city in low spirit. In the following period of time, Xiao Chun stayed in Tyrant Emperor's city and personally oversaw Bazhou. At the same time, the situation in Bazhou became more and more stable. Many local forces in Bazhou intended to submit to the Sword sect. Now that the Black Emperor sect had taken the initiative to withdraw and the Sword sect had taken over Bazhou, these forces naturally chose to submit to the Sword sect. Compared to the previous time when the Sword sect took over Wuzhou, it was obviously easier to take over Bazhou this time. The reason was that the Sword sect was powerful. Because the Sword sect was much stronger than before, they did not encounter much resistance when they took over as the overlord this time. Many forces chose to submit directly. In less than a month's time, the Bazhou had completely fallen into the control of the Sword Gate. The ordinary people who had gathered outside the 100 Swords city also returned to their hometowns one after another. Order was restored in Bazhou and it was no longer as chaotic as before. In order to maintain order, Xiao Chun naturally left behind many experts from the Sword sect to guard Bazhou and continue to stabilize the order in Bazhou. After Bazhou was settled, Xiao Chun brought Song Xing and the others back to the Sword sect. Now that Bazhou was under the control of the Sword sect, Xiao Chun did not need to worry too much about the following matters. The development of the Sword sect was in full swing. After returning to the Sword sect, Xiao Chun began to cultivate in seclusion. Although he was unable to break through for the time being, the 5-year deadline was getting closer and closer. Xiao Chun was actually preparing to break through to the Tao realm. After emerging from the 100 Spirits' secret realm, Xiao Chun's cultivation had reached the great perfection of the comprehension realm. Now that over 2 years had passed, less than half of the 5-year deadline was left. As a result, Xiao Chun could indeed prepare to break through to the Tao realm. Breaking through to a major realm was clearly not an easy task. Fortunately, Xiao Chun had the support of the entire Sword sect. He did not lack various cultivation resources and pills at all. Moreover, as the Sword sect became stronger, the Sword sect's foundation became more and more profound as well. The Sword sect was completely capable of providing sufficient pills and cultivation resources to support Xiao Chun's breakthrough to the Tao realm. Time passed slowly and the Sword sect returned to its peaceful state. Xiao Chun was also immersed in cultivation every day. Unknowingly, 3 years had passed. After 3 years of preparation, Xiao Chun was about to break through to the Tao realm. 5 years had passed since the 100 Spirits' secret realm. Xiao Chun could definitely break through again. Xiao Chun's breakthrough from the great perfection of the Tao realm to the Tao realm was indeed a huge matter for the Sword sect. After all, Xiao Chun was the sect leader of the Sword sect. The stronger Xiao Chun was, the better it was for the Sword sect. On this day, Song Xing, Zhou Song, and Wu Huan all came to Xiao Chun's cave abode. Xiao Chun was going to go into seclusion to break through to the Tao realm. The various heavenly treasures and pills that were prepared for Xiao Chun's breakthrough had already been prepared. Looking at Xiao Chun, Song Xing and the other two smiled and said, "We wish the sect leader success in breaking through to the Tao realm." The 3 of them were very optimistic about Xiao Chun's breakthrough to the Tao realm. Firstly, Xiao Chun's foundation was very stable and his talent was top-notch. Secondly, with the support of the entire Sword sect, it should not be too difficult for Xiao Chun to break through to the Tao realm. It was just a matter of time. The Tao realm was not too difficult for Xiao Chun. Hearing the 3 of them, Xiao Chun smiled and did not say much. He then turned his head to look at Qin Shuru and the other women. He nodded slightly at them, and then turned to enter the secret chamber. After entering the secret chamber alone, Xiao Chun sat on the futon with his eyes closed. He was not in a hurry to break through. Instead, he calmed his mind and adjusted his condition to the best. It took Xiao Chun an entire day to adjust his condition. Only then did he take out a pill the size of a longan fruit from his storage ring. This pill was called the Tao-breaking pill. It was a top-notch pill refined by the Dan Valley. It could be said to be extremely precious in the Great Thousand World. The Tao-breaking pill only had one use, which was to help in breaking through to the Tao realm. The Tao-breaking pill was the most precious pill that Xiao Chun had prepared for himself this time. Of course, with the current strength of the Sword Sect, a Tao-breaking pill was nothing. As early as a year ago, Xiao Chun had ordered people to go to the Dan Valley to bring back this Tao-breaking pill in preparation for breaking through to the Tao realm today. Holding the Tao-breaking pill in his hand, a rich pill fragrance quickly spread in the secret chamber. At the same time, Xiao Chun did not hesitate and swallowed the pill directly into his stomach. After the Tao-breaking pill entered his stomach, a pure medicinal power quickly cut through Xiao Chun's body and integrated into his meridians. Naturally, the Tao-breaking pill alone was not enough. Breaking through to the Tao realm required a large amount of spiritual energy as support. After swallowing the Tao-breaking pill, Xiao Chun took out a golden pill and swallowed it into his stomach. Xiao Chun closed his eyes. In fact, his cultivation had already reached the great fulfillment of the comprehension realm when he left the 100 spirits realm. Over the past 5 years, Xiao Chun had deliberately suppressed his cultivation and did not make any breakthroughs. His cultivation had already reached the limit of the great fulfillment of the comprehension realm and was only one step away from the Tao realm. At this time, after swallowing the Tao-breaking pill, Xiao Chun's cultivation soared. Soon, he touched the threshold of the Tao realm and began to break through to the Tao realm. Breaking through to the great realm was obviously not something that could be done overnight. In this regard, Xiao Chun knew very well, so he did not need to be too anxious. Moreover, with the suppression and consolidation in the past 5 years, Xiao Chun did not have absolute confidence in breaking through to the Tao realm this time, but he had at least 80 to 90% confidence. Therefore, there was no need to be anxious. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2048. Xiao Chun began his closed-door cultivation to break through to the Tao realm. As for the matters of the Sword Sect, they were naturally handed over to Song Xing and the other deputy sect masters to handle. However, according to Xiao Chun's arrangement, Song Xing was basically the first deputy sect master of the Sword Sect as long as he was not present. His authority was much greater than that of the other deputy sect masters. Xiao Chun began his closed-door cultivation to break through to the Tao realm. As for the matters of the Sword Sect, they were naturally handed over to Song Xing and the other deputy sect masters to handle. However, according to Xiao Chun's arrangement, Song Xing was basically the first deputy sect master of the Sword Sect as long as he was not present. His authority was much greater than that of the other deputy sect masters. However, at this moment, Song Xing's mood was somewhat heavy. In the cave dwelling hall, a sword head stood in front of Song Xing, and Song Xing said with an ugly expression, "The shrines suddenly made a move?" The shrines were also one of the 10 great Lingtian sects in the Great Thousand World. Originally, the sudden attack of the shrines had nothing to do with the Sword Sect. However, the reason why Song Xing was so concerned was that the shrines had attacked the Moon Palace. It had been a month since Xiao Chun began his closed-door cultivation. However, just 3 days ago, the shrines and the Moon Palace had suddenly fought. Even the shrine's hall master and Luo Xing had personally participated in the battle. Although a battle between the 10 great Lingtian sects was not common in the Great Thousand World, it had happened before. In fact, Song Xing did not have to be so worried. However, others might not know that Song Xing was not worried about the Sword Sect, but about the Heavenly Sect. It had always been clear that the reason why Katian sect did not dare to act rashly was because of Dragon Palace and Moon Palace. Now that almost all the experts of Moon Palace were restrained by shrines, wasn't this an excellent opportunity for Katian's sect? And with Song Xing's understanding of Heavenly Gate and Tao Ming, he definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity. What Song Xing was worried about was whether Heavenly Gate would use this opportunity to attack again. If that was the case, then Moon Palace definitely wouldn't be able to help the Sword Sect this time. Even Song Xing secretly guessed that the shrine's attack on the Moon Palace was because of the Heavenly Gate. With a grave expression, Song Xing said to the sword leader in front of him, "Inform the other deputy sect leaders that we have a meeting in the main hall." Upon hearing Song Xing's words, the sword leader quickly informed Zhou Song and the other deputy sect leaders. Not long after, all the deputy sect leaders, except for those who were not in the sword sect, gathered in the main hall. Looking at the crowd, Song Xing did not keep them in suspense and said directly, "Everyone, I just received news that a battle has broken out between Shrines and Moon Palace." Upon hearing this, the expressions of the other deputy sect leaders changed slightly. Then, Zhou Song took the lead and said, "Song Xing's words are not impossible. Katian sect has never given up on our sword sect, so we have to be on our guard." The Moon Palace was restrained by the shrines, and it was hard to say whether Katian sect was behind it. However, with the relationship between the two sects, they had to be on guard against Katian sect's attack. As a matter of fact, all of the deputy headmasters knew that in the face of the threat of the coiling Heaven Gate, relying on external forces was not a long-term solution. Only when the Sword's Gate was truly strong enough to not fear the coiling Heaven Gate would they be able to completely eliminate the threat from the coiling Heaven Gate. Everyone understood this logic. However, the Sword Sect still needed time to reach the same height as Katian Sect, and Katian Sect obviously wouldn't give the Sword Sect that time. Hearing Zhou Song's words, everyone fell silent. Then, Lin Qing said, "Send someone to Tianzhou and see how Katian sect reacts to this." Now, they still couldn't be sure if Katian sect was behind this, so they could only send out spies to investigate before making further plans. Hearing Lin Qing's words, everyone expressed their agreement. Seeing this, Song Xing also said in a low voice, "That's the only way." Facing Katian sect, the Sword Sect was still powerless. This was an undeniable fact. However, Song Xing and the others had guessed wrong this time. The Divine Palace and the Moon Palace suddenly fought, but this matter had nothing to do with the Heavenly Gate. Katian sect and the shrines weren't familiar with each other. Moreover, Tao Ming couldn't have ordered the shrines to attack Moon Palace. Therefore, this time's matter was just a coincidence. It was just that this coincidence came at the right time. Just as the Sword Sect learned about the battle between the Shrines and Moon Palace, Katian Sect also learned about it. In the main hall, Tao Ming revealed a cold smile and sneered, "A heaven-sent opportunity, a heaven-sent opportunity. This time, even the heavens want to destroy your Sword Sect." Tao Ming had never given up on the Sword Sect. However, because he was afraid of Moon Palace and Dragon Palace, he didn't make a move against the Sword Sect. But this time, the Moon Palace and the Celestial Palace were engaged in a battle. All of the Moon Palace's Qi practitioners were being held back by the Celestial Palace. As such, even if the Moon Palace wanted to, they wouldn't be able to send any reinforcements to Sword's Gate. In Tao Ming's opinion, this was definitely the best opportunity to deal with the Sword Sect. This time, he had to completely destroy the Sword Sect. Without Moon Palace, there was only Dragon Palace and at most Danqingyang. This way, Katian Sect would have the opportunity to destroy the Sword Sect. Thinking of this, Tao Ming's eyes flashed with coldness. Tao Ming definitely couldn't miss such a heaven-sent opportunity. Moreover, he couldn't give the Sword Sect any more time to develop. This time, he had to completely destroy the Sword Sect. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, Tao Ming once again went to Mu Tian Mountain. He wanted to ask Yun Chun for help here. As it was hard to guarantee that the old dragon from Dragon Palace wouldn't come, Tao Ming needed to be fully prepared. Tao Ming once again came to Mu Tian Mountain. Seeing this, Yun Chun seemed to have guessed Tao Ming's intentions and said with a smile, "Senior brother really doesn't let go of any opportunity. The sword sect will always be a threat. If we don't eliminate the sword sect, I won't feel at ease. This is the best opportunity. The women from Moon Palace are being held back by shrines. This time, the sword sect will definitely be destroyed," Tao Ming said coldly when he heard Yun Chen's words. With their relationship, Tao Ming naturally didn't need to beat around the bush with Yun Chen. Hearing this, Yun Chen's expression didn't change. After a moment of silence, he said plainly, "Since we are martial brothers, I will naturally lend senior martial brother a hand. However, I will only stop that old dragon. If Swords Gate has other backup plans, then junior martial brother will not be able to help. Yun Chen would only stop Long Yuan. If the sword sect had other backup plans, Yun Chen wouldn't be able to do anything." Hearing this, Tao Ming immediately sneered and said, "Don't worry. The sword sect is now a turtle in a jar. They won't be able to escape. Junior brother, you only need to stop Long Yuan. I don't believe that any of the 10 great Lingtian sects will help the sword sect. Without relying on external forces, if I want to destroy the sword sect, it will be a piece of cake." Tao Ming didn't believe that any of the 10 great Lingtian sects other than Moon Palace and Dragon Palace would help the sword sect. Therefore, Tao Ming was very confident this time. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2049. The Moon Palace was being held back by the shrines. Tao Ming felt that this was the best chance to destroy the sword sect. Without the sword sect, Tao Ming didn't believe that the sword sect could escape this calamity with just the Dragon Palace. Upon hearing Tao Ming's words, Yun Chun by the side helplessly said in a soft voice, "Senior, this sword gate is almost becoming your nightmare. This is not good." Destroying the sword sect had indeed gradually become Tao Ming's obsession. However, such an obsession was obviously not beneficial to a cultivator. Although Tao Ming was an Emperor Realm expert and his mental state could be said to be impeccable, the more impeccable it seemed, the more serious the consequences would be if there was even a crack in it. Yun Chen wanted to remind Tao Ming that such an obsession wasn't beneficial to him at all. Hearing this, Tao Ming said in a deep voice, "I naturally know that. However, if the sword sect isn't destroyed, I won't be at ease. However, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, I will definitely destroy the sword sect." Tao Ming knew that such an obsession wasn't good. However, since it had already formed, what could he do now? However, the good thing was that this time, Tao Ming saw the possibility of destroying the sword sect. As long as the sword sect was destroyed, the obsession in his heart would naturally disappear. Hearing Tao Ming's words, Yun Chen didn't say anything else. After all, outsiders couldn't help in such a matter. Everything depended on Tao Ming. The two of them discussed the matter. This time, in order to let Tao Ming truly have the confidence to destroy the sword sect, Yun Chen even mobilized 10 End Realm experts from Mu Tian Mountain to attack together. It could be said that he spared no effort in supporting Tao Ming. Tao Ming was naturally grateful to Yun Chen for this. After being silent for many years, the Heavenly Sect made a move once again. Their target was still the Sword Sect. Following the Heavenly Sect's actions, the Sword Sect also received the news very quickly. The Sword Sect had been closely monitoring the Heavenly Sect's every move, so the moment the Heavenly Sect made a move, the Sword Sect received the news. Hearing that the Hutian Sect was preparing to attack the Sword Sect again, Song Xing and the other Vice Sect masters of the Sword Sect gathered in the main hall. Wu Huan said with a gloomy expression, "What a bunch of mad dogs. They won't let go once they bite us?" From Wu Huan's point of view, the Heavenly Gate was indeed a mad dog that would not let go of the Sword Sect no matter what. This was already the third time the Heavenly Gate had launched an attack on the Sword Sect. The first 2 times had ended in failure, but the heavenly sect was not discouraged at all. They wanted to destroy the sword sect as soon as they had the chance. Hearing Wu Huan's words, the other people's expressions also turned ugly. At this time, Xiao Qian was still in seclusion to break through to the Tao realm. At such a critical moment, no one could disturb him. If Xiao Qian failed to break through to the Tao realm this time, it would definitely be a huge blow to Xiao Qian. The sect master was in seclusion, and the Heavenly Gate was launching another large-scale attack. All the vice sect masters present suddenly had a heavy heart. But the good thing was that at least the sword sect could still rely on Dragon Palace. They had already sent a letter asking for help from Dragon Palace, and now they could only wait for Dragon Palace's reply. The Sword's Gate alone would not be able to stop the coiling Heaven Gate. This was something that everyone present knew. Now they could only wait for Dragon Palace's reply. At the same time, the Sword Sect also needed to set up a defensive line outside Bazhou to deal with the Heavenly Gate's attack. No one thought of surrendering, because everyone knew what the result of surrendering would be. With Tao Ming's determination to destroy the Sword Sect, even if they surrendered, the experts of the Sword Sect would not have a good ending. They could only fight to the death. After making a decision, Lin Qing said coldly, "One day, we must destroy the Heavenly Gate." The Sword Sect and the Heavenly Gate had been mortal enemies for a long time. One day, if the Sword Sect had the strength to destroy the Heavenly Gate, they would not hesitate to attack the Heavenly Gate and would not give them any chance. Hearing Lin Qing's words, everyone's eyes flashed with a cold light. However, it was still impossible for them to destroy the coiling Heaven Sect. The most important thing was to defend against the coiling Heaven Sect's attack. If they couldn't defend against it, not to mention destroying the coiling Heaven Sect, the Sword's Gate would probably be destroyed first. On the same day, the deputy sect masters of the Sword Sect and a group of experts of the Sword Sect rushed to Bazhou to prepare for the upcoming attack of the Heavenly Gate. In the face of the war that broke out again, the big and small forces in Bazhou had already become numb. This was already the third war between the Heavenly Gate and the Sword Sect. Neither side was willing to give way to the other. The Heavenly Gate was determined to destroy the Sword Sect, and the Sword Sect would never surrender without a fight. After several rounds of war, everyone knew that the Heavenly Gate and the Sword Sect could never coexist. In the vast thousand world, only one of the two could survive. Either the Heavenly Gate was destroyed or the Sword Sect was destroyed. While the experts of the Sword Sect were rushing to Bazhou, in the Dragon Palace, Long Qing stood before Long Yuan. She already knew about the Heavenly Gate's attack and looked at Long Yuan with a pleading expression. Master, Long Qing definitely hoped that Long Yuan would lend a hand. If not, how could the Sword Sect resist the Heavenly Gate with their strength alone? Upon hearing Long Qing's words, Long Yuan revealed a faint smile. "All right, I didn't say that I wouldn't lend a hand. But this Tao Ming is really stubborn. How long is he going to keep this up?" Even Long Yuan felt that Tao Ming's repeated attacks on the Sword's Gate was a little pointless. Tao Ming would attack the Sword's Gate on a large scale whenever there was a chance. It was indeed a little stubborn. Upon hearing Long Yuan's promise, Long Qing instantly revealed a smile and immediately sent the news back to the Sword Sect. When Tsang Xing and the others received Long Qing's reply, they were naturally happy that Dragon Palace agreed to help. With the help of the Dragon Palace, they had a chance to stop the Heavenly Gate. Long Qing's reply was equivalent to giving the Sword Sect a shot in the arm, which indeed made the Sword Sect feel a lot more relaxed. However, even with the support of the Dragon Palace, the Sword Sect was still under a lot more pressure this time compared to the last time. After all, the Moon Palace had no way to support the Sword Sect at this time. At this time, the Moon Palace and the shrines were already locked in a fierce battle. The Moon Palace, who could barely fend for themselves, couldn't spare any time to support the Sword Sect. Therefore, compared to the last time, the Sword Sect was still under a lot more pressure this time. Having arrived at the border of Bazhou, the Sword Sect set up a defensive line and waited for the arrival of the Heavenly Gate. At night, Song Xing and the other deputy sect masters gathered again. At this time, everyone's faces turned ugly again. The news has been confirmed. Mu Tian Mountain's supreme cloud has also joined the battle. Just like the last time, there are 2 emperors. Looking at the crowd, Zhou Song said faintly. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2050. Many experts from the Katian sect were rushing towards Bazhou. At the same time, the Sword Sect's spies had also successfully discovered that Supreme Cloud, Yunchen of Mount Mu Mountain, was with Tao Ming. Many experts from the Katian sect were rushing towards Bazhou. At the same time, the Sword Sect's spies had also successfully discovered that Supreme Cloud, Yunchen of Mount Mu Mountain, was with Tao Ming. The Sword Sect had already expected that Yunchen would help Tao Ming. However, to be honest, this was the situation that Song Xing and the other deputy sect leaders of the Sword Sect were most unwilling to see. This was within their expectations. However, Song Xing and the other deputy sect leaders' hearts still sank when they heard the news. 2 emperors. On the Sword Sect's side, other than Long Yuan, there were no other emperors. Although Long Yuan was an emperor who had been famous for a long time and his seniority was almost on par with Junhua, no one was confident that he would be able to fight against 2 emperors alone. They all fell into silence, but since things had already come to this point, there was no point in talking about anything else. Swords Gate could not afford to take a step back in the face of the Katian sect's invasion, because once they did, they would be destroyed. While the Sword Sect was waiting for the Katian sect's large-scale attack, on the other side, in the Sword Sect's secret room where Shao Chun was cultivating in seclusion, a terrifying aura soared into the sky. Obviously, this was the aura of Shao Chun successfully breaking through to the Dao realm. After cultivating in seclusion for more than a month, his cultivation had finally broken through to the Dao realm. As Shao Chun broke through, Qin Shuru and the others also came out of the secret room. After waiting for almost 4 hours, this aura slowly dissipated. Then, the door of the secret room opened and Shao Chun slowly walked out. This breakthrough to the Dao realm was not too difficult for Shao Chun. After all, Shao Chun could be said to have made ample preparations for this breakthrough. He had prepared for this for several years and had the full support of the Sword Sect. As such, if Shao Chun still could not break through to the Dao realm, it could only mean that there was a problem with his talent. In terms of talent, Shao Chun was definitely the best. There was no doubt about that. A successful breakthrough in cultivation should have been a happy occasion. However, at this moment, Shao Chun, who walked out of the secret room, did not look happy at all. Instead, he asked Qin Shuru and the other ladies with a puzzled look on his face. What happened? Earlier, Shao Chun had already sensed with his divine sense that none of the experts in the Sword Sect were in the sect. Not to mention the deputy sect leaders, even the Comprehension and Immortal Emperor deacons and disciples were not in the sect. This undoubtedly meant that something big must have happened in the Sword Sect while he was in seclusion. In the face of Shao Chun's question, Qin Shuru and the other ladies did not hide anything. They immediately told him what had happened while Shao Chun was in seclusion. First, it was the battle between the Moon Palace and the shrines. Then, it was the Coiling Heaven sect's second attack on the Sword Sect. These 2 incidents were not to be underestimated. They were major events that concerned the survival of the Sword Sect. Upon hearing that the Coiling Heaven sect had attacked for the 3rd time, a cold light flashed in Shao Chun's eyes. This Coiling Heaven sect is really relentless. The Sword Sect had already repelled the Coiling Heaven sect's first 2 attacks. However, the Coiling Heaven sect was still unwilling to give up. Naturally, Shao Chun was furious that they had attacked for the 3rd time. Seeing the cold expression on Shao Chun's face, Qin Shuru and the other ladies were also worried. Moreover, they could not count on the Moon Palace this time. Only the Dragon Palace had expressed their willingness to support the Sword Sect. However, the Dragon Palace alone paled in comparison to the joint forces of Tao Ming and Yun Qin. It was still unknown whether Long Yuan could stop Tao Ming and Yun Qin alone. Xiao Chen's expression was cold. Originally, he had just broken through and needed some time to stabilize his cultivation. However, with the current situation, there was no time for Xiao Chen to stabilize his cultivation. As the sect master of the Sword Sect, Xiao Chen had to rush to the front line as soon as possible. Immediately, he informed Qin Shuru and the other ladies. Without calling Xianyuan Ling, who was cultivating, Xiao Chen rushed to Bazhou alone. Xianyuan Ling's cultivation was only at the comprehension realm. He would not be of much use in such a big battle. Therefore, Xiao Chen did not disturb him. He rushed all the way to Bazhou and arrived at the defensive line of the Sword Sect. Upon learning that Xiao Chen had come out of seclusion, Song Xing and the other deputy sect masters personally came out to welcome him. Without paying attention to the etiquette, the group went directly to the hall and sat on the main seat. Xiao Chen went straight to the point. "How's the situation? The Dragon Palace has agreed to help, but Mu Tianshan has also taken action. Yun Qin and Tao Ming are two emperors, so the situation is not very optimistic." In response to Xiao Chen's inquiry, Song Xing answered truthfully. It was good news that the Dragon Palace was willing to help. However, Yun Qin had also taken action. This was undoubtedly one disaster after another for the Sword Sect. Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with determination when he heard that Sword's Gate would still have to face two venerable sovereigns this time. The situation this time was more dangerous than the previous time. This time, the Sword Sect could not count on the Moon Palace. They only had the Dragon Palace as their support. Looking at the people present with a determined expression, Xiao Chen said in a deep voice, "Everyone, the Katian sect has not given up on destroying the Sword Sect. No one can say for sure what the outcome will be this time. Perhaps the Sword Sect will be destroyed. However, even so, no one in the Sword Sect will surrender. We would rather fight to the death to take a bite out of the Katian sect." In the face of such a huge gap in strength, Xiao Chen did not have any good ideas. The only way was to fight to the death. Surrendering was absolutely impossible, and if he wanted to rope in other helpers, not to mention whether it was possible, there was absolutely no time to do so. This time, the Katian sect took advantage of the battle between the Moon Palace and the shrines to attack the Sword Sect again. As a result, there was no time for the Sword Sect to rope in other helpers. Xiao Chen was determined to fight to the death. Even if the final result was to be destroyed by the Katian sect, he was determined to make the Katian sect pay the price. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's eyes also showed a touch of determination under the gaze of Xiao Chen. Now that things had come to this, it was indeed the only way. Fighting to the death and not surrendering was the only choice for the Sword Sect. Song Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Lin Qing, and the other deputy sect masters of the Sword Sect all nodded heavily. Seeing this, Xiao Chen said coldly, "There's no need to think too much. Just give the order to fight." The arrival of Xiao Chen made Song Xing and the others determined to fight to the death. As the deputy sect masters of the Sword Sect, they had long been integrated with the Sword Sect. If the Sword Sect was destroyed, there would be no meaning for them to live. Please add, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2051. No one present could say for sure what the final outcome of this battle would be. After all, they couldn't count on Moon Palace this time, and no one could be sure that Long Yuan would be able to stop two emperors with Yun Chen's help. Therefore, no one knew the final outcome. However, no matter what the outcome was, in Xiao Chen's opinion, the Sword Sect could be destroyed, but they would never surrender. Everyone was determined to die. Thus, starting from Xiao Chen, Everyone in the Sword Gate was waiting for the arrival of the Coiling Heaven sect with a common enemy. While everyone in the Sword sect was waiting, on the other side, Tao Ming and Yun Chun were leading the experts from Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain towards Bazhou. Inside the starship, Tao Ming and Yun Chun were sitting opposite each other. From their expressions, it was not difficult to see that they were in a relatively relaxed mood. Perhaps in their opinion, the Sword Sect was doomed this time. They already knew that Dragon Palace would support the Sword Sect, but so what? Dragon Palace alone might not be able to protect the Sword Sect, and Moon Palace certainly wouldn't be able to support the Sword Sect. After taking a sip of wine, Tao Ming looked at Yun Chun and chuckled softly. "Junior brother, if that old dragon comes, are you confident?" The old dragon Tao Ming was talking about was naturally Long Yuan. If Dragon Palace intervened, Long Yuan would definitely come in person. Hearing Tao Ming's words, Yun Chun smiled slightly. If it's just holding him back, it shouldn't be a problem. Yun Chun wasn't sure if he could defeat Long Yuan. After all, Long Yuan had been famous for many years and was naturally not easy to deal with. However, if it was just holding him back, Yun Chun had absolute confidence. After all, even though Yun Chun and Tao Ming weren't as old as Long Yuan, the two of them were Emperor Realm Masters in Qinwei. Naturally, they weren't just for show. Hearing Yun Chun's words, Tao Ming smiled and said indifferently, "If that's the case, the Sword Sect will be destroyed." Tao Ming was fully confident that he could destroy the Sword Sect this time, and he was really grateful to the shrines. If it weren't for the shrines suddenly fighting with Moon Palace, Tao Ming wouldn't have had such a great opportunity. The Heavenly Sect army was approaching step by step. In the blink of an eye, Tao Ming, Yun Chun, and a group of experts from Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain arrived in Bazhou 3 days. In front of the Swords Gate, Shao Chun and the other experts of the Swords Gate appeared one after another in the face of the many starships of the coalescing sect. At the same time, the experts of the Dragon Abyss and the Dragon Palace were also on standby. Long Yuan personally led the experts of Dragon Palace to Bazhou a day ago. At this moment, they were standing side by side with Shao Chun. Long Yuan looked at the Katian sect and said in a serious tone, "Boy, this battle won't be easy." Long Yuan was not exaggerating. This battle was indeed very difficult. Shao Chun didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the leading starship. Under Shao Chun's gaze, Tao Ming and Yun Chun soon appeared in front of everyone. Tao Ming and Yun Chun appeared and glanced at the people of Swords Gate and Dragon Palace. Seeing that Long Yuan was the only Emperor Realm cultivator, Tao Ming was completely relieved. It would be easy to handle if there was only Long Yuan. Tao Ming sneered at Long Yuan and said, "Long Yuan, you're already so old, but you still like to meddle in other people's business?" They were all emperors, so Tao Ming was naturally not afraid of Long Yuan. Hearing this, Long Yuan said indifferently, "Two little kids, you talk big." Long Yuan did not show the slightest hint of fear. Even in the face of two emperors, Long Yuan still appeared indifferent and casual. Seeing this, a cold light flashed in Tao Ming's eyes. He immediately shouted, "You don't know what's good for you. Kill them." There was nothing to say. This time, Tao Ming had to destroy the Sword Sect. Only in this way could he truly be at ease. As Tao Ming's voice fell, the experts from Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain immediately attacked. Seeing this, the people from Dragon Palace and Sword Sect did not hesitate and immediately went up to meet them. The two sides suddenly engaged in a fierce battle. This was already the third battle between the Sword Sect and Heavenly Sect. In just a few years, Heavenly Sect and Sword Sect had already fought 3 times. Both sides could be said to be very familiar with each other. At the same time, their hearts were filled with hatred. When the battle broke out, Long Yuan naturally also attacked, attacking Tao Ming and Yun Chun. Seeing this, Yun Chun took the initiative to meet Long Yuan, while Tao Ming chose to avoid him. Anyway, Tao Ming's target wasn't Dragon Palace, so he wasn't interested in killing Long Yuan. Yun Chun was enough to hold this old man back. As for Tao Ming, his main task was to destroy the sword sect. Yun Chun and Long Yuan directly engaged in a fierce battle, trying to hold him back. Seeing this, Long Yuan naturally knew what Yun Chun was thinking, and a cold smile appeared on his face. You alone are not enough to fight me. As he spoke, Long Yuan transformed into his original form. A huge dragon that was hundreds of feet long appeared in the sky. Then, accompanied by a dragon roar, the surrounding space was imprisoned. Dragon Realm. With a low roar, Long Yuan directly used the Dragon Clan's remarkable ability, Dragon Realm, trapping Tao Ming and Yun Chun within. Long Yuan definitely couldn't let Tao Ming free up. Otherwise, if Tao Ming was not restrained, it would be a disaster for the sword sect. If an Emperor-level figure wasn't stopped by an Emperor-level figure, then to the cultivators below, even if it was an End-realm expert, it would be a huge disaster. Long Yuan knew that it was very difficult to fight 1 against 2, but he had no choice. He could only hold Tao Ming and Yun Chun back with his own strength. Being trapped by the Dragon Realm, a trace of coldness flashed through Tao Ming's eyes. Reckless. Long Yuan actually wanted to fight the two of them with his own strength. In Tao Ming's eyes, this was simply too arrogant. A trace of anger appeared in his heart, but Tao Ming still didn't choose to attack Long Yuan. Because in Tao Ming's heart, destroying the sword sect was the most important thing. Apart from that, everything else could be put aside for now. He was trapped by the Dragon Realm, but this was only temporary. Immediately, Tao Ming began to attack the spirit formation that sealed the surroundings. Under Tao Ming's fierce attacks, the Dragon Realm began to violently tremble, and at that moment, Long Yuan was firmly held back by Yun Chun. Seeing that Tao Ming didn't care about anything else and only wanted to destroy the spirit formation, Long Yuan's eyes turned cold. Then, he spat out a red light from his mouth and shouted in a low voice, "Dragon Breath." The thick red light headed straight for Tao Ming. Seeing that, Yun Chun took the opportunity to point out with a finger and fiercely hit Long Yuan. Being distracted in a battle between Emperor-level experts isn't a good habit, said Yun Chun with a faint smile after hitting Long Yuan with his finger. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2052. Tao Ming wanted to forcefully break the Dragon Realm, and Long Yuan wanted to stop Tao Ming even at the risk of getting injured. Tao Ming wanted to forcefully break the Dragon Realm, and Long Yuan wanted to stop Tao Ming even at the risk of getting injured. A dragon's breath blasted onto Tao Ming's body. Although Tao Ming reacted at the first instance, so he did not suffer any substantial damage, Long Yuan's attack still thoroughly infuriated Tao Ming. In Tao Ming's opinion, he didn't have any hostility towards Long Yuan, but this old man kept pestering him for the sake of the sword sect, even at the risk of getting injured. The anger in Tao Ming's eyes continued to rise. After blocking Long Yuan's dragon's breath, Tao Ming said coldly, "Old man, I wanted to let you go, but since you're courting death, you can't blame anyone else." After saying that, Tao Ming changed his direction and attacked the dragon abyss. Tao Ming's original plan was to ignore Long Yuan and let Yun Chun hold Long Yuan back, while he forcefully broke the Dragon Realm and attacked the sword sect. However, Long Yuan's relentlessness made Tao Ming furious. In this way, he would defeat this old man first, and then attack the sword sect. The result would be the same anyway. Tao Ming changed his previous plan and attacked Long Yuan with Yun Chun. Facing the siege of two Emperor-level figures, Long Yuan was naturally under a lot of pressure. He gradually gained the upper hand. At this time, Yun Chun attacked while smiling at Tao Ming. "Why, have you changed your plan? This old man is courting death. Let's take him down first." Hearing this, Tao Ming shouted in a deep voice, and at the same time, his attacks became more and more violent. Facing the fierce attacks of two Emperor-level figures at the same time, even though Long Yuan was strong, he couldn't resist for a while. Long Yuan and the other two were fighting, and at this time, Long Yuan was obviously at a disadvantage. Seeing that Long Yuan was gradually suppressed by Tao Ming and Yunchen, Xiao Chen, who was fighting fiercely with a Dao realm expert from the heavenly sect, was also in a serious mood. Long Yuan was the only emperor-level figure on his side. If he was defeated, the result was already obvious. At that time, who in the sword sect could stop Tao Ming? His heart was incomparably heavy, but there was nothing he could do. After all, this was a gap in strength, and it wasn't something that could be solved just by thinking of some scheme. He did not know if Long Yuan could stop Tao Ming and Yunchen, but there was nothing Xiao Chen could do about it at the moment. A battle of that level was not something that the current Xiao Chen could interfere in. There was no other way. Everything seemed to be up to fate. He focused on dealing with the enemy in front of him. The fierce battle continued. The current situation was no longer something that Xiao Chen could control. No one could say for sure who would win or lose. The fierce battle continued, and as time went by, Long Yuan's body began to show signs of injuries. The vitality of an Emperor Realm Master was very strong, but facing two Emperor Realm Masters, Long Yuan was inevitably injured. It had been several hours since the battle broke out, and the fact that Long Yuan could hold on for so long under the joint attack of Tao Ming and Yun Chen was enough to show how strong he was. Moreover, seeing Long Yuan's injuries getting worse and worse, Xiao Chen actually did not feel good. After all, this matter had nothing to do with Long Yuan and Dragon Palace. The reason why Long Yuan chose to fight to the death with Tao Ming and Yun Chen was entirely because of Long Qing. Xiao Chen was there to support the Sword Gate in the first place, and he was very touched that Long Yuan was willing to go this far. Seeing that Long Yuan's injuries were getting worse and worse, Long Qing, who was fighting fiercely with the heavenly sect, was naturally worried. The same was true for Xiao Chen. It was enough. Moreover, after fighting for so long, Xiao Chen already knew that Long Yuan was indeed not a match for Tao Ming and Yun Chen. They were both Emperor Realm Masters, so it was too much for Long Yuan to fight one against two. The outcome was basically determined. Understanding this, Xiao Chen finally made a decision in his heart. While fighting, Xiao Chen shouted at Long Yuan, "Senior, it's enough. I will remember today's kindness in my heart. If I can survive, I will repay you." Xiao Chen's words were enough for Long Yuan to retreat. Long Yuan was not a member of the Sword Sect, and had nothing to do with him. If it were not for Long Qing, Long Yuan would not have cared about these things at all. Now, Long Yuan had led a group of experts from Dragon Palace to support the Sword Sect and fought with Tao Ming and Yun Chen to such an extent. In Xiao Chen's view, he had indeed done everything he could. If Long Yuan was really seriously injured or killed here, Xiao Chen would not be able to live with himself. Since the outcome was determined and everything was in vain, there was no need for Long Yuan and the experts of Dragon Palace to sacrifice themselves here in vain. Xiao Chen gestured for Long Yuan to lead the people of Dragon Palace away. Long Yuan had a complicated look in his eyes when he heard Xiao Chen's words. In fact, Long Yuan had expected such a result before the battle began. That was why he told Xiao Chen that it would be a tough battle. They were all Emperor Realm Masters. Even Long Yuan himself did not have much confidence in fighting one against two. If the battle continued, Dragon Palace might suffer serious casualties. Thinking of this, Long Yuan said in a deep voice, "Boy, I can still protect you and keep you safe." The Sword Sect was definitely lost, but Long Yuan could still protect Xiao Chen. As long as Xiao Chen followed Long Yuan back to Dragon Palace, there was no need to worry about his safety. However, after hearing Long Yuan's words, Xiao Chen shook his head and smiled. As the sect master of the Sword Sect, how can I abandon the sect and live alone? Junior appreciates Senior's kindness. As the sect master of the Sword Sect, Xiao Chen naturally could not abandon the Sword Sect and escape alone. This was impossible. If so, even if Xiao Chen survived, it would be no different from death. Seeing that Xiao Chen did not intend to live alone, Long Yuan sighed secretly and did not say anything more. He was about to order the people of Dragon Palace to retreat. After all, as the ancestor of Dragon Palace, Long Yuan could not let Dragon Palace fight to the death for the sword sect. However, just as Long Yuan was about to speak, a space crack suddenly appeared, and then, an aura no weaker than Long Yuan, Tao Ming, and Yun Chen's diffused out. Another Emperor Realm Master had arrived. Feeling the appearance of this aura, Long Yuan and the others were stunned. Who was this? The sudden appearance of an Emperor Realm Master surprised Long Yuan and the others, but soon, an old man in gray linen clothes walked out of the space crack with a smile on his face. You came at the right time. Seeing the old man, Long Yuan was stunned at first, but then he was overjoyed. Jun Wuya, please add this to your collection. Monthly vote recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 2053. Long Yuan, who was fighting against two emperors alone, was ready to retreat, but at the last moment Jun Wuya appeared. The person who had come was Xiao Chen's master, Jun Wuya. This time, Jun Wuya had come with his real body, which was far from being comparable to the spirit doppelganger from before. The relationship between Jun Wuya and Xiao Chen had long been known in the Great Thousand World. Therefore, when he saw Jun Wuya, Long Yuan was so happy. Of course, it was not only Long Yuan. Xiao Chen, Long Qing, and the people from the sword sect were also overjoyed. Even Zhou Song and Wu Huan's eyes were slightly red. After so many years, the two of them had finally seen their master again. However, there were some who were happy and some who were sad. Compared to the ecstasy of the sword sect, Tao Ming and Yun Chen's expressions had become extremely solemn. Although Jun Wuya was an emperor like them, there were strong and weak emperors in the Great Thousand World. Since Jun Wuya was known as the strongest person in the Great Thousand World, his strength was definitely at the top even among the emperors. A hint of fear involuntarily flashed in their eyes as they looked at Jun Wuya. Both Tao Ming and Yun Chen were afraid. There was no way around it. Jun Wuya's name was well known in the Great Thousand World, and there were probably not many people who did not know about him. Jun Wuya looked very calm and casual in the face of everyone's gazes. He first glanced at Xiao Chen, then locked his gaze on Tao Ming and Yun Chen. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he said with a faint smile, "It seems that my disciple has been taken care of by you all these years." His tone sounded very casual, as though he was chatting with an old friend. However, after saying that, Jun Wuya slowly walked towards Tao Ming and Yun Chen. With every step he took, Jun Wuya's aura grew slightly stronger. They were all Emperor-grade masters, but in terms of aura alone, Jun Wuya was clearly stronger than Tao Ming and Yun Chen. Upon sensing Jun Wuya's oppressive aura, Tao Ming and Yun Chen couldn't help but exclaim inwardly, "So this is the strongest being in the Great Thousand World." The two of them had never fought Jun Wuya before. After all, when the two of them became famous, Jun Wuya was already the top expert in the Great Thousand World. At that time, Jun Wuya was not interested in fighting with two juniors. Although his pace was slow, Jun Wuya soon arrived in front of the two of them. At the same time, he smiled at Long Yuan and asked, "How is it? Can you still fight?" Long Yuan's injuries were not light. After all, he had been fighting against two Emperor-grade masters at the same time. It was not easy for Long Yuan to hold on until now. However, even though he was injured, Long Yuan still smiled when he heard Jun Wuya's words. Why not? Long Yuan and Jun Wuya were obviously more familiar with each other. After all, the two of them were from the same era, so naturally they had interacted a lot. Jun Wuya smiled when he heard Long Yuan's words. Then, he fixed his eyes on Tao Ming and Yun Chen. Jun Wuya's sudden appearance had indeed surprised Tao Ming and Yun Chen. After all, Jun Wuya had not appeared in the Great Thousand World for many years. Moreover, according to some rumors, Jun Weiyao was not in the Great Thousand World. Therefore, Tao Ming was not worried about Jun Weiyao at all. However, at this critical juncture, Jun Weiyao had returned to the Great Thousand World. In this way, with Jun Weyao's participation, the situation seemed to have changed completely. Most importantly, Jun Weiyao was not an ordinary emperor-grade master. Compared to Luo Xing, Jun Weiyao was stronger, not weaker. Tao Ming did not have the slightest confidence to win against Jun Weiyao, and he was afraid of him. He did not have the slightest confidence to defeat Jun Weiyao. As for Yun Chen, in a one-on-one situation, even if Long Yuan was injured, it would be difficult to determine the winner in a short time. When he thought about the consequences of being defeated by Jun Weiyao, Tao Ming did not dare to think about it. Jun Weiyao was afraid before the battle, but he did not give Tao Ming too much time. He gently stretched out his hand, and without any warning, Jun Weiyao chose to attack. The seemingly casual palm only lasted for an instant. However, Tao Ming felt as though there was a large invisible hand around him that was tightly gripping his body. The terrifying pressure caused the surrounding space to show signs of collapsing. At the same time, the enormous pressure caused Tao Ming to feel as though he was about to be squeezed to death. With just one attack, Jun Wuya's powerful strength was completely revealed. Feeling Jun Wuya's terrifying aura, Long Yuan and Yun Chen could not help but look at him. After not fighting in the Great Thousand World for so many years, many people had gradually forgotten how terrifying Jun Wuya, the top master of the Great Thousand World, was. At this time, after so many years, Jun Wuya attacked again. Long Yuan and Yun Chen realized that Jun Wuya's strength had improved greatly compared to many years ago. His strength was stronger than before. In the face of Jun Wuya's attack, Tao Ming was shocked. Naturally, he would not allow himself to be captured without a fight. Immediately, his aura exploded, and he directly attacked Jun Wuya with his palm. Bright King Seal. As the palm fell, a terrifying palm formed by spiritual energy immediately attacked Jun Wuya. Looking at Tao Ming's Bright King Seal, everyone wanted to see how Jun Wuya would block it. In other words, as emperors, how big was the gap between Jun Wuya and Tao Ming's strength? Under everyone's gaze, Jun Wuya did not have any intention of dodging. He gently pointed his finger, and a black light directly shot out. At the same time, he softly chanted, "Black Lotus Annihilation." In the blink of an eye, the black light collided with Tao Ming's Bright King Seal. Then, the black light exploded, and in the sky, it quickly formed a beautiful black lotus. When the black lotus was formed, rays of black light shot out from it. In an instant, wherever the black light passed, the space collapsed and was easily torn apart like tofu. Looking at Jun Wuya's Black Lotus Annihilation, Long Yuan and Yun Chen almost shouted at the same time. "Everyone back off." Jun Wuya and Tao Ming attacked. Both of them did not confine the space. In this way, when their killing moves collided, one could imagine how powerful the aftershock would be. At least, End Realm experts would not be able to block it. Hearing Long Yuan and Yun Chen's words, regardless of whether it was the Sword Sect, Dragon Palace, Heavenly Sect, or Mu Tian Mountain experts, they all immediately flew into the distance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2054. No one dared to hesitate at this moment. Even an End Realm expert wouldn't dare to say that they could block the aftershock of an Emperor Realm expert's attack. No one dared to hesitate at this moment. Even an End Realm expert wouldn't dare to say that they could block the aftershock of an Emperor Realm expert's attack. Especially a top expert like Jun Wuya. He wasn't someone that an ordinary Emperor Realm expert could compare to. Everyone, including Xiao Chen, chose to retreat immediately after hearing Long Yuan and Yun Chen's word. They didn't dare to stay around the two of them. Black rays of light fell from the sky like raindrops. At this moment, everyone finally understood why Qin Yuan and Yun Chen were so anxious and hurriedly asked everyone to evacuate. When the black light scattered from the Black Lotus landed on the ground, it immediately exploded violently. The power of each black light was equivalent to an End Realm expert's full power attack. With so many black lights, one could imagine that if someone was enveloped by the black light, the result would be death. Just one move had such terrifying power. Moreover, Tao Ming's Emperor's Seal was also directly destroyed by the black light. Countless black lights bombarded the Emperor's Seal. The power of the Emperor's Seal was constantly being depleted. In the end, it could only completely dissipate. The Emperor's Seal was completely destroyed. However, the extremely demonic Black Lotus was still quietly floating in the sky. It was as if the destruction of the Emperor's Seal didn't affect it at all. After a head-on collision, Jun Wuya and Tao Ming's strength was clearly superior. At the same time, Jun Wuya said calmly, "Little kid, your talent is not bad. However, some things still need time to accumulate. If you want to defeat me, you might be able to do so after tens of thousands of years. However, you are still not my match now." In Jun Wuya's eyes, Tao Ming was just a junior. Although he was already an Emperor Realm expert, it was still the same. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Tao Ming's face turned gloomy, but he did not refute it. That was because the collision just now had already made Tao Ming aware of the difference in strength between the two of them. Looking at Jun Wuya with a fearful expression, Tao Ming did not say a word. At the same time, Jun Wuya did not waste any more words. With a gentle wave of his hand, the Black Lotus shot directly towards Tao Ming. The Black Lotus fiercely attacked Tao Ming. At the same time, the black light from the Black Lotus shot out again and wrapped around Tao Ming like a vine. It was Tao Ming's first time seeing such a strange attack. Although he tried his best to resist, the black light seemed to be endless. He couldn't get rid of it at all. As soon as you defeated one beam of black light, 2 or 3 more beams of black light would attack you at almost the same time. More and more black light continued to entangle Tao Ming. If Jun Wuya really had the ability to kill him, then what level had his cultivation reached? For the first time, a hint of fear appeared in Tao Ming's eyes. Looking at Jun Wuya, Tao Ming's fighting spirit was weakening. He originally thought that this time it would be easy to destroy the sword sect. However, in the end, Jun Wuya arrived in time and completely reversed the situation. Even Tao Ming's own life was threatened. Just as Tao Ming was panicking, a second bolt of black lightning struck down from the sky, fiercely striking towards Tao Ming. Sensing the second bolt of black lightning, a hint of determination flashed in Tao Ming's eyes. He gritted his teeth as if he was making an important decision. In just a moment, Tao Ming made a decision and shouted in a low voice, "Jun Wuya, this king will remember what happened today." After saying that, Tao Ming's body abruptly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood mist in the sky and then dissipating. At the last moment, Tao Ming used an escape technique to escape. Of course, such a divine ability would definitely cause some damage to Tao Ming. At least for a long time in the future, Tao Ming would probably have to go into seclusion to heal his injuries. After Tao Ming escaped, Yun Chen looked at Jun Wuya with a complicated expression, then also left in a flash. With the departure of the two emperors, there was no need to say what the remaining powerhouses of Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain should do. They could only choose to escape. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2055. Jun Wuya forced Tao Ming back in a few moves. Ignoring the fleeing Tao Ming, Jun Wuya didn't choose to chase after him. Jun Wuya forced Tao Ming back in a few moves. Ignoring the fleeing Tao Ming, Jun Wuya didn't choose to chase after him. Firstly, Tao Ming had used his escape technique, and it was hard to catch up. Furthermore, even if he caught up, it wouldn't be easy for Jun Wuya to kill Tao Ming. Although Jun Huia looked like he could easily kill Tao Ming was still an emperor-level figure. How could such a figure be killed so easily? Hence, instead of wasting his efforts on Tao Ming and not knowing if he could be killed by the sword Qi, he might as well target the experts from Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain. Facing the experts from the two sects who were frantically trying to escape, without Tao Ming and Yun Chen holding them back, Jun Huia saw them as lambs waiting to be slaughtered. You think you can come and go as you please? Do you really think this is the backyard of your two sects? His gaze was calm and his expression was indifferent as he muttered softly. Then, Jun Huia formed a seal with his hands and the black lotus in the sky once again sent down bolts of black lightning. This time, the power of the black lightning was clearly weaker. However, there were many of them and they attacked indiscriminately, falling down like raindrops. Jun Huia directly attacked and started a massacre of the experts from Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain. Without the protection of Tao Ming and Yun Chen, these people were directly exposed in front of Jun Huia, and they didn't have the ability to fight back. The tables had turned. All along, the Sword Sect had been suppressed by Tao Ming and Yun Chen, the two emperor-level figures. But now, Heavenly Sect and Mu Tian Mountain finally felt the fear of being massacred by emperor-level figures. Needless to say, Comprehension Realm and Dao Realm experts were no match for Jun Huia. Even End Realm experts wouldn't be able to fight back against Jun Huia's attack. For a moment, the two sects suffered heavy casualties. Most of them managed to escape, but many of them died at the hands of Jun Huia. Among them, Mu Tian Mountain lost an End Realm expert while Hutian Sect lost 3 End Realm experts. Such a loss was extremely heavy for both sections. Not daring to stay any longer, the experts of the two sects immediately fled in all directions. The third attack on the Sword Sect ended in failure as well. Moreover, this time was different from the previous 2 times. Although the previous 2 times had failed, Katian Sect did not pay a huge price. However, this time, with Jun Huia's ruthless attack, Katian Sect had indeed paid a heavy price. He directly repelled Katian Sect's attack. At the same time, Xiao Chen also shouted, "Kill." He didn't chase the previous 2 times, but this time, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't let the experts of Katian Sect escape so easily. Just as Jun Huia had said, Katian Sect could come and go as they pleased to the Sword Sect. They simply treated this place as their own backyard. This time, if they didn't give Katian Sect a good beating, Tao Ming probably wouldn't learn his lesson. Moreover, because Tao Ming was wary of Jun Huia, he had already escaped. The experts of Katian Sect had no protection. As such, they wouldn't be in any danger if the Sword Sect chased after them. Song Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Lin Qing, and a group of experts of the Sword Sect, under the leadership of several people, began to chase after Tao Ming. For a time, Katian Sect's side could be said to have suffered heavy casualties. Xiao Chen didn't participate in the chase. Instead, he immediately went to Jun Huia. Looking at Jun Huia, Xiao Chen couldn't help but smile and said, "Master." Jun Huia's return naturally made Xiao Chen ecstatic. Facing Xiao Chen's smiling face, Jun Huia also smiled faintly and said, "Not bad. It seems that you haven't been lazy all these years." Xiao Chen's cultivation was now at the entry level of the Dao realm. It seemed that Xiao Chen hadn't been lazy all these years. His cultivation had improved rapidly. Hearing Jun Huia's words, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. It wasn't that Xiao Chen didn't want to be lazy all these years. It was that he couldn't be lazy at all. In order to make the Sword Sect stronger, Xiao Chen didn't dare to slack off at all. He seized every opportunity to improve his cultivation and strength. Only then could he break through to the Dao realm. Xiao Chen was undoubtedly under a lot of pressure to become the sect leader of the Sword Sect. However, at this moment, seeing Jun Huia, Xiao Chen also heaved a sigh of relief from the bottom of his heart. This was because Jun Huia was his master. With Jun Huia around, Xiao Chen didn't need to take on everything by himself. Moreover, Jun Weiyao was different from Luo Xing and Long Yuan. Although the two of them helped the sword sect with all their strength, they were still outsiders. However, Jun Weiyao was different. In Xiao Chen's opinion, Jun Weiyao was a member of the sword sect. In this way, the sword sect would at least have the ability to protect itself when facing the heavenly sect. After heaving a rare sigh of relief, Xiao Chen didn't pay attention to the situation on the battlefield. The heavenly sect was defeated like a landslide. It was impossible for the heavenly sect to fight the sword sect now. Many experts from the heavenly sect only wanted to escape at this moment. They didn't have the mood to be entangled with the sword sect. The outcome had been decided. While Xiao Chen and Jun Weiyao were talking, Long Yuan laughed and said, "Jun Weiyao, you haven't appeared in the Great Thousand World for hundreds of years." Long Yuan and Jun Weiyao knew each other. Upon hearing this, Jun Weiyao smiled faintly and said, "Yes, thank you very much this time." Long Yuan had helped the sword sect twice and helped Xiao Chen. Jun Weiyao also thanked him. If it wasn't for Long Yuan, Jun Weiyao might not have been able to catch up. In the face of Jun Weiyao's gratitude, Long Yuan continued to smile and said, "Well, since you're back, I guess there's nothing left for me to do. You don't have to worry about the sword sect anymore. By the way, is this kid really your last disciple?" Since Jun Weiyao had returned, the heavenly sect would have to think twice before making a move on the sword sect in the future. However, Long Yuan was still curious about whether Xiao Chen was Jun Weiyao's last disciple. Although this matter had spread throughout the Great Thousand World, Jun Weiyao had never admitted it personally. Hence, Long Yuan asked curiously. After all, Jun Weiyao had never officially accepted a disciple in his life. In the face of Long Yuan's question, Jun Weiyao smiled and glanced at Xiao Chen. "If he's not my last disciple, why would I rush back?" Jun Weiyao had admitted his and Xiao Chen's identities. Upon hearing this, Long Yuan looked at Xiao Chen enviously. To be Jun Weiyao's last disciple was indeed the dream of countless people in the Great Thousand World. Moreover, with Jun Weiyao's support, Long Yuan was almost certain that the sword sect would be one of the top 10 Lingtian sects soon. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2056. The few of them chatted for a while. At the same time, the experts from Heavenly Gate and Mount Mu fled in all directions. The sword sect chased after them. After killing a portion of the experts from Heavenly Gate, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and the rest returned with their teams. The few of them chatted for a while. At the same time, the experts from Heavenly Gate and Mount Mu fled in all directions. The sword sect chased after them. After killing a portion of the experts from Heavenly Gate, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and the rest returned with their teams. When they saw Jun Weiyao, Zhou Song and Wu Huan were very excited. They respected Jun Weiyao from the bottom of their hearts. Although Jun Weiyao had never acknowledged them as his disciples, Zhou Song and Wu Huan had always treated Jun Weiyao as their master. If not for that, they would not have worked so hard to assist Xiao Chen all these years. When they saw Jun Weiyao, their eyes reddened as they called out, "Master." This time, Jun Weiyao did not object to them calling him master. He nodded slightly and said, "Not bad. It's been hard on you all these years." This seemed to be the first time. In Zhou Song and Wu Huan's memories, Jun Weiyao had praised them. For a moment, the two of them were very excited. The corners of their mouths unconsciously curled into a smile. They looked like two happy children. Zhou Song and Wu Huan knew their own talent. They had never thought of surpassing Jun Weiyao in this lifetime. Their only wish was to be acknowledged and acknowledged by Jun Weiyao. Now, it seemed that this wish had come true. Next, the experts from the sword sect returned one after another. After this battle, although the sword sect had suffered some casualties, overall it was much smaller than Heavenly Gates. Heavenly Joining Sect didn't expect Jun Weiyao to rush back in time and was caught off guard. Thus they paid a huge price. Not mentioning other things, Just the death of those 3 End Realm experts was enough to make Heavenly Joining Sect feel pained for a period of time. After the battle ended, Shao Qin left Song Xing and Lin Qing in charge of guarding, while the rest returned to the Sword Sect. Of course, Long Yuan and the other experts from Dragon Palace were also invited back to the Sword Sect by Shao Qin. This time, they were able to defeat Heavenly Gate's attack once again. Needless to say, Jun Wuya also had the help of Dragon Palace. Through the teleportation formation, everyone quickly returned to the Sword Sect. Looking at the imposing Sword Sect now, Jun Wuya sighed. How glorious was the Sword Sect in the past? Jun Wuya had witnessed the glory of the Sword Sect with his own eyes. However, the moment his words left his mouth, Long Yuan, who was by the side, said with a smile, "All right, with your precious disciple and you, I believe the Sword Sect will be able to return to the top 10 Ling Tian sects very soon." Long Yuan said this to test Jun Wuya. After all, Jun Wuya had never joined any sect in his life, nor had he built any power. Long Yuan didn't know if Jun Wuya would choose to join the Sword Sect. However, after hearing his words, Jun Wuya didn't refute at all. Such a reaction made Long Yuan have a strange thought. It seemed that Shao Chen's position in Jun Wuya's heart was indeed very high. There was no doubt about this. For Shao Chen, Jun Wuya would very likely join the Sword Sect. This was Long Yuan's guess. Once Jun Wuya joined the Sword Sect, the Sword Sect's strength would increase qualitatively. All along, when the Sword Sect faced the Heavenly Gate, they were unable to fight back. The reason wasn't because of the number of End Realm experts, but because they didn't have an Emperor Realm expert. Without an Emperor Realm expert, no one in the Sword Sect would be able to defend against Tao Ming. This was the Sword Sect's biggest problem, and this problem couldn't be solved. After all, Emperor Realm experts weren't cabbages that could be found on the street. However, now, with the return of Jun Wuya, this problem seemed to be solved instantly. In this way, the Sword Sect completely had the ability to challenge the 10 Great Ling Tian sect. The most important thing, and the most terrifying thing, was that Jun Wuya wasn't an ordinary Emperor Realm expert. He was known as the strongest person in the Great Thousand World. Jun Wuya's strength actually surpassed almost all the Emperor Realm experts in the Great Thousand World. After personally seeing how Jun Wuya forced Tao Ming to retreat, Long Yuan secretly wondered if he could win if he fought with Jun Wuya. The answer was obviously no. Although Long Yuan was confident that he could keep his life, he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could defeat Jun Wuya. Moreover, it was still unknown whether Jun Wuya had used his full strength or not. Everyone returned to the Sword Sect. They had won the battle. On the other side, Tao Ming, who had successfully escaped, was now with Yun Chun. They had gathered many Heavenly Gate experts who had escaped. After knowing that 3 End Realm experts from the Heavenly Gate had died, Tao Ming's face, which was already pale, became even uglier. He had failed again. He originally thought that this time it was a sure win, but who would have thought that he would fail again and pay such a heavy price? 3 End Realm experts had died. Just as Shao Chun had thought, Tao Ming's heart was bleeding. Damn Sword Sect, why did it have to be like this? Tao Ming couldn't help but roar towards the sky. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. A small Sword Sect had attacked 3 times in a row, but all of them had ended in failure. Tao Ming didn't understand why a small Sword Sect couldn't be destroyed. With the strength of the Heavenly Gate, they had attacked the Sword Sect time and time again, but in the end it had all ended in failure. This was something that Tao Ming found hard to accept. Seeing Tao Ming spit out blood, the experts of the Heavenly Gate hurriedly went up to support him. Seeing this, Yun Chen also sighed helplessly. He could see that after this failure, Tao Ming's mental state had completely cracked. If this continued, the outcome would be obvious. If they didn't solve the Sword Sect problem, it would be difficult for Tao Ming's cultivation to improve in the future. He wanted to comfort Tao Ming, but when the words reached his mouth, Yun Chen didn't know what to say. In the end, he could only sigh silently. It could be said that it was a complete defeat. There was no other way. The people of the Heavenly Gate and Mu Tianshan could only choose to retreat. Following the outcome of this battle, all the major forces in the Great Thousand World received the news immediately. For a time, the Great Thousand World was shocked by this battle. Of course, the major forces weren't shocked by the outcome of the battle, but by the return of Junwuya. He hadn't appeared in the Great Thousand World for hundreds of years, but this time, Junwuya had returned with a strong force. Not only did he help the Sword Sect defeat the joint attack of the Heavenly Gate and Mu Tianshan, but he even personally forced Tao Ming to retreat. Junwuya's return was what truly shocked the major forces. After all, Junwuya wasn't an ordinary person. He was the strongest person in the Great Thousand World. His return could change the entire situation of the Great Thousand World. This was something that even the other 10 Lingtian sects didn't dare to underestimate. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2057. The return of Junwuya caused all the major forces in the Great Thousand World to have different thoughts. However, there was one thing that everyone had in common. They were all waiting for the impact that Junwuya's return would have on the Great Thousand World. The Katian sect was once again defeated. Regarding this, all the major forces in the Great Thousand World understood that from now on, it would probably be very difficult for the Katian sect to destroy the Sword Sect because they had already missed the best opportunity. Before Junwuya's return, the Katian sect had not been able to successfully destroy the Sword Sect. Now that Junwuya had returned, it was even more impossible for the Katian sect to succeed. Not many people paid attention to the Katian sect anymore. Currently, all the major forces had their eyes on the Sword Sect. Even many of the 10 great Lingtian sects had begun to pay attention to the Sword Sect. The shrines who were in a fierce battle with the Moon Palace had a temporary truce on this day. The Shrine's Hall Master was also looking at the information about the Sword Sect in his hands with a faint smile on his face as he murmured softly. The Sword Sect. Looks like the 10 great Lingtian sects are going to change again. The Shrine's Hall Master felt that the Sword Sect already possessed the ability to challenge the 10 great Lingtian sects. The most important reason was that the Sword Sect had an emperor-level character, Junwuya. The Shrine's Hall Master was not the only one who felt this way. Dan Valley, Weapon Sect, Talisman Sect, and the other 10 great Lingtian sects all felt that the Sword Sect would definitely challenge the 10 great Lingtian sect. As for their target, there was no need to doubt that it was the Katian sect. With the enmity between the Katian sect and the Sword Sect, if the Sword Sect really started to challenge the 10 great Lingtian sects, the Katian sect would naturally be the first to bear the brunt. It was not only because the Heavenly Sect was the weakest among the 10 great Lingtian sects, but it was also because the Heavenly Sect had tried to annihilate the Sword Sect time and time again. As such, once the Sword Sect had sufficient strength, there would definitely be an intense battle between the two sections. Peace was restored for the time being. Under the gaze of many forces, Shao Qin and Junwuya sat opposite each other in the courtyard of the Sword Sect. Junwuya's return indeed made Shao Qin heave a sigh of relief. At this time, Shao Qin was also persuading Junwuya to join the Sword Sect. In fact, even without Shao Qin's words, Junwuya had already made up his mind. This time, Junwuya had originally planned to join the Sword Sect. Looking at Shao Qin, Junwuya's eyes flashed with a touch of gratification. After all these years in the Great Thousand World, Shao Qin had not disappointed him. Junwuya was very gratified about this. Not only his own strength, but also the Sword Sect and Shao Qin had developed very well. There's no need to say any more. I've already decided to join the Sword Sect. Junwuya was very satisfied with Shao Qin, his only last disciple, so before Shao Qin could speak, he spoke first. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen's face immediately lit up with joy. However, Jun Wuya continued, "Don't be too happy. Master has joined the sword sect, but I won't care about those trivial matters. You know Master's personality, so I'll just use an empty title." Jun Wuya had joined the sword sect, but he was not willing to manage those trivial matters of the sword sect. Therefore, even if Jun Wuya joined, the matters of the sword sect would still be handled by Xiaochen himself. Jun Wuya did not care about things like authority. Or rather, at Jun Wuya's level, he represented supreme power, so Jun Wuya did not care about these things at all. Compared to being entangled with those trivial matters every day, Jun Wuya preferred to live a carefree life. Of course, if the sword sect was in trouble or needed his help, Jun Wuya would not just stand by and watch. To put it bluntly, Jun Wuya joining the sword sect was more of a symbolic meaning. He could be considered as a guardian of the sword sect. However, what the sword sect needed the most now was a guardian like Jun Wuya. Therefore, Xiao Chen did not mind at all when he heard this. As long as Jun Wuya was willing to join the sword sect, everything would be fine. He was overjoyed. With the addition of Jun Wuya, the sword sect now had its own emperor-level figure. As a result, although the sword sect could not be compared to the other 10 great Lingtian sects in other aspects, it was already much stronger compared to the Black Emperor sect, Tai Ching Temple, and other super first-rate forces. It could be said that the sword sect's current strength was between the 10 great Lingtian sects and the super first-rate forces. It could be considered a quasi-Lingtian sect. After settling the matter, Xiao Chen also planned to find a day to announce that Jun Wuya had joined the sword sect. Moreover, Xiao Chen did not plan to hastily announce that Jun Wuya had joined the sword sect. When the time came, he would definitely invite all the great sects to be present and announce it in public. Holding a grand event could not only increase the reputation of the sword sect in the Great Thousand World, but it could also deter those who had ulterior motives and tell them that the sword sect was no longer a force to be reckoned with, including the 10 great Lingtian sects. He also told Jun Wuya his thoughts. Jun Wuya did not have any objections to this. After obtaining Jun Wuya's permission, Xiao Chen ordered Zhou Song and Wu Huan to be in charge of this matter the next day. All the forces in the Great Thousand World were invited. Zhou Song and Wu Huan were ecstatic about this task that Xiao Chen assigned them. After all, if Jun Wuya joined the sword sect, they would be able to accompany their master often in the future. This had always been Zhou Song and Wu Huan's wish. While Xiao Chen was busy preparing for the grand event, Nangong Guan personally came to the Sword Province. When he saw his eldest senior brother again, Xiao Chen personally greeted him and said with a smile, "Eldest senior brother, you're here to look for master, right?" Xiao Chen easily guessed the purpose of Nangong Guan's visit. It was definitely because of Jun Wuya. Nangong Guan did not hide this matter and immediately nodded. Nangong Guan had traveled thousands of miles to the Sword Province to see Jun Wuya. After not seeing him for so many years, Nangong Guan naturally missed her master. However, apart from this, Nangong Guan also had another matter. Nangong Guan did not beat around the bush. After she and Xiao Chen arrived at the sword sect's main hall, Nangong Guan spoke bluntly. "Junior brother has guessed half of it. I'm indeed here to see master. However, apart from this, there's another matter that I want to discuss with junior brother." "Oh, senior brother, please speak," Xiao Chen said with a curious expression. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, Nangong Guan's next words surprised Xiao Chen. Nangong Guan's expression was serious as she spoke in a neither hurried nor slow manner. "I want to move family Nangong to the Sword Province. From now on, family Nangong will be a subsidiary power of the Sword Sect. What does junior brother think about this?" When Nangong Guan said this, Xiao Chen was stunned. He looked at Nangong Guan in disbelief and said, "Eldest senior brother, you're not joking, right? Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 2058. Nangong Guan wanted to move the entire family Nangong to the Sword Province and make the family Nangong a subsidiary power of the Sword Sect. When he heard this, Xiao Chen was stunned. One had to know that back then, Xiao Chen had wanted to pull Nangong Guan into the Sword Sect. After all, Nangong Guan was still an End Realm expert. However, at that time, Nangong Guan didn't agree. As the head of the family Nangong, Nangong Guan naturally couldn't act alone. She had to think for the family Nangong. Moreover, at that time, the other members of the family Nangong didn't think highly of the Sword Sect. Naturally, they wouldn't allow Nangong Guan to join the Sword Sect. However, the situation now was clearly different. The Sword Sect was like the sun in the sky. Not only did it repel the Heavenly Gate's attacks 3 times, it even had an Emperor Realm expert overseeing it. As such, the other members of the family Nangong naturally didn't oppose becoming a subsidiary power of the Sword Sect. Moreover, to be honest, with Nangong Guan and Xiao Chen's relationship, if the family Nangong became a subsidiary power of the Sword Sect, they would definitely receive much more than other subsidiary powers. Therefore, this time, no one in the family Nangong objected to Nangong Guan's decision. They were all willing to move the family Nangong to the Sword Province and become a subsidiary power of the Sword Sect. With the Sword Sect as their backer, the family Nangong's development wouldn't be bad. Moreover, if the Sword Sect really became one of the top 10 Lingtian sects in the future, the family Nangong would naturally rise as well. Nangong Guan clearly wasn't joking. After being stunned for a moment, a smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face. Eldest senior brother is probably doing this because of Master. With Jun Wuya's return, Nangong Guan intended to merge the family Nangong into the Sword Sect. Xiao Chen guessed that it was mostly because of Jun Wuya. Nangong Guan didn't deny this and nodded. It is indeed because of Master. Nangong Guan's decision was indeed related to Jun Wuya. However, the strength of the Sword Sect was also a very important factor. Otherwise, the people in the family probably wouldn't agree to Nangong Guan's decision. Xiao Chen naturally didn't have a reason to refuse the family Nangong. Moreover, with Nangong Guan's existence, he didn't have to worry about the family Nangong's loyalty. Moreover, as a first-rate force, family Nangong wasn't weak. Especially now that the Sword Sect was subordinate to them, there weren't any first-rate forces that were willing to become their subordinate. Xiao Chen immediately agreed to Nangong Guan's request. However, he also had his own request. Nangong Guan had to step down from her position as family Nangong's head and join the Sword Sect. She would become a vice-sect master of the Sword Sect like Zhou Song and Wu Huan. Nangong Guan had already expected Xiao Chen's decision, so she agreed without hesitation. In truth, in Nangong Guan's heart, the position of family Nangong's head wasn't very attractive. On the contrary, she was more willing to join the Sword Sect like Zhou Song and Wu Huan. That way, Nangong Guan would be able to accompany her master. Although with Jun Wuya's personality, even if he joined the Sword Sect, it wouldn't be simple. However, no matter what, she would still be in the same sect as her master. This was what Nangong Guan and the others had always wished for. With Nangong Guan joining, the number of End Realm experts in the Sword Sect had increased by 1. This was naturally good news for Xiao Chen. After settling the matter, Xiao Chen brought Nangong Guan to Jun Wuya's residence. Here, Nangong Guan finally saw her master, whom she had been separated from for a long time. Compared to when he was with Xiao Chen, Jun Wuya's attitude towards Nangong Guan, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Xiao Xiao was much colder. However, the 4 of them weren't dissatisfied at all. At the same time, they knew in their hearts that in Jun Wuya's heart, they definitely couldn't compare to Xiao Chen. The 3 of them sat together and chatted for a while. After spending the night in the Sword Sect, Nangong Guan rode back to family Nangong and prepared to move. Moving the entire family Nangong to Jianzhou wasn't a simple matter. As the head of the family Nangong, Nangong Guan obviously had to personally oversee everything. After Nangong Guan left, Zhou Song and Wu Huan had already sent people to send invitations to the various major powers. For example, the Black Emperor sect, Tai Ching Temple, Dragon Palace, Moon Palace, and other powers that were already familiar with the Sword sect were all invited. Tai Ching Temple, on a mountain peak surrounded by clouds, Taoist Bai Song had just sent off the people from the Sword sect. At this moment, he looked at the invitation in his hand and muttered to himself, "The rise of the Sword sect is already unstoppable. The Tai Ching Temple, which was once one of the 6 superpowers, can only look up to them now." Taoist Bai Song sighed softly. Hearing this, an old man beside him, who was also an End Realm expert, also sighed softly. "Luckily, we don't have any conflict or enmity with the Sword sect. Otherwise, the rise of the Sword sect wouldn't be good news. Haha, now I really admire He Sui. He is really decisive." Hearing this, Taoist Bai Song laughed. He Sui decisively gave up on Bazhou and moved to Linzhou, which was far away from the Sword sect. It was said that the Black Emperor sect was developing well in Linzhou and had already become the new overlord of Linzhou. Actually, He Sui had naturally thought deeply before choosing the Lin prefecture. Originally, there were no powerful forces in the Lin prefecture. As a result, the arrival of the Black Emperor sect would naturally allow them to easily control the entire Lin prefecture. Secondly, there were no forces that could threaten the Black Emperor sect in the surroundings of the Lin prefecture. This gave the Black Emperor sect an extremely good space to develop. Taoist Bai Song sighed at He Sui's decisiveness. At the same time, within the Black Emperor sect in Linzhou, He Sui also received the invitation from the Sword sect. At this moment, he sat in the courtyard and looked at the invitation in his hand. A faint smile appeared on his face. At this moment, He Sui felt more and more that his decision back then was correct. He didn't miss Bazhou and chose to give it up. With that, he avoided a direct conflict with the Sword sect. With the Sword sect's current strength and Junwuya, it wasn't difficult for them to destroy the Black Emperor sect. If the Black Emperor sect still remained in Bazhou, then it wouldn't be long before a war would erupt between the two sides. The final result would probably be the destruction of the Black Emperor sect or the submission of the Sword sect. From the looks of it, his decision back then was completely correct. Seeing the smile on He Sui's face, Zhao Qinfeng asked, "Sect Master, the Sword sect has invited us. Should we go?" "Go, of course we're going. Right now, we're far away in Linzhou and no longer have any conflicts of interest with the Sword sect. Why shouldn't we go? Moreover, with the rise of the Sword sect, there's no harm in befriending the Sword sect," He Sui replied without hesitation. "Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2059. The Sword sect had invited all the major forces with great fanfare this time. Although they did not explicitly state the reason, everyone could still guess that it had something to do with Junwuya. At the thought that Junwuya might join the Sword sect, all the major forces were once again wary of the Sword sect. However, even though many people had already guessed this, the Sword sect had not explicitly stated it, so everything was still unknown. The ceremony held by the Sword sect had undoubtedly become the most sensational event in the Great Thousand World. After all, the Sword sect had indeed attracted a lot of attention over the years. Moreover, with the rise of the Sword sect, every move of the Sword sect naturally attracted the attention of countless people at this time. The date of the ceremony was set for half a month later. During this period, the entire Sword sect was preparing for the ceremony with all their might. Deputy sect masters like Song Xing, Lin Qing, and He Xin already knew that this ceremony was specially set up for Junwuya. At the thought that the Sword sect would also have an emperor-level figure in the future, and that it would be Junwuya, who was known as the strongest person in the Great Thousand World. Song Xing and the others were extremely excited. This meant that the sword sect had really made a qualitative leap. Even if the current sword sect dared not to say that they would win against the heavenly sect alone, they would definitely not be like before, where they would not have the slightest ability to resist and would need to rely on external forces to deal with the heavenly sect. The sword sect was full of vitality because of Jun Wuya's return. However, as the person involved, Jun Wuya, did not appear at all, as if nothing had happened. Just as Jun Wuya had said, he did not like to bother with these trivial matters. Therefore, even if he had joined the sword sect, these matters were still handled by Xiaoqun, while Jun Wuya was happy to be idle. The preparations for the ceremony were carried out in an orderly manner, and in half a month, the war between the Moon Palace and the shrines gradually subsided. Originally, the strength of these two forces was on par with each other. After fighting fiercely for almost a month, both sides had paid a heavy price. It was meaningless to continue fighting. Naturally, they chose to shake hands and make peace. After the battle with the shrines ended, Luo Xing brought Xiao Xiao and a few Moon Palace experts to the sword sect. Xiao Chen naturally welcomed Luo Xing personally. However, Luo Xing's first words upon seeing Xiao Chen were, "Where's that old guy?" It was obvious that he had rushed over because of Jun Wuya. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly and helplessly. He then brought Luo Xing to Jun Wuya's residence. Within the dwelling, Luo Xing also saw Jun Wuya sitting in the courtyard and drinking tea. A trace of displeasure appeared on his face. He walked up and snorted coldly, "You still know how to come back?" His words were full of jealousy. Seeing this, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao also wanted to say something to Jun Wuya, especially Xiao Xiao. However, it was obviously inappropriate for them to do so in this situation. He gently tugged on Xiao Xiao's sleeve and looked at each other. The two of them quietly left the courtyard, leaving Jun Wuya and Luo Xing alone. After Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao left, Jun Wuya glanced at Luo Xing somewhat helplessly. He then sighed softly, "You didn't come here just to denounce me, right?" The matter between him and Luo Xing was indeed unclear. Hearing this, Luo Xing did not stand on ceremony and directly sat down beside Jun Wuya. Then, she poured herself a cup of tea and water. "Back then, you left without saying a word. This time, you even left such a huge trouble for me. Tell me, how are you going to thank me?" The trouble that Luo Xing mentioned was naturally related to the sword sect. In response, Jun Wuya shook his head with a smile. "You know my character, so why do you have to do this? Hasn't that guy from the Heavenly Policy residence always been in love with you?" Jun Wuya was naturally aware of Luo Xing's feelings for him. After so many years, how could Jun Wuya not feel everything that Luo Xing had shown him? However, for Jun Wuya, this kind of love between a man and a woman, he was really not used to it. He was used to being a carefree person, and suddenly having a woman by his side made him feel a little awkward. It wasn't that he hated Luo Xing, nor did he say that she was bad. On the contrary, Luo Xing could be said to be an almost perfect woman. Luo Xing had great strength, great talent, and unparalleled beauty. In the Great Thousand World, there were many people who admired Luo Xing, and there were even emperors. For example, the Heavenly Policy Palace's palace master had always admired Luo Xing, but Luo Xing did not seem to have any feelings for him. From the beginning to the end, there was only Jun Wuya in Luo Xing's heart. Upon hearing Jun Wuya's words, Luo Xing curled her lips and said, "It's my business who I like." Indeed, Luo Xing didn't have any feelings for the Heavenly Policy Residence's mansion master. In response, Jun Wuya let out a helpless sigh. He knew that this woman was stubborn and couldn't be reasoned with. He didn't linger on this topic any longer. In the next few days, Luo Xing and Xiao Xiao stayed in the sword sect and waited for the ceremony to begin. As time passed, the date of the sword sect's ceremony was getting closer and closer. At the same time, the sect masters and sect masters of the various forces arrived at the Sword sect one after another. For a time, Sword's Gate could be said to be as crowded as a marketplace. Those weaker sects and clans did not dare to be absent, nor did they dare to not give face to Sword's Gate. As for the 10 great Ling Tian sects, they had also participated in this grand ceremony because of Junwu, the ancestor of Dragon Palace, Long Yuan, and the Palace Master of Moon Palace, Luo Xing, and the Valley Master of Dan Valley, Dan Qingyang, were also present. With the arrival of the emperors, the various forces who came to the Sword sect to participate in the ceremony were filled with emotions. It could be seen that Dragon Palace, Moon Palace, Dan Valley, and even the Weapon sect had already regarded the Sword sect as an existence on the same level. Otherwise, emperors like Long Yuan, Luo Xing, Dan Qingyang, and the sect master of the Weapon sect wouldn't have come personally. Any one of them would have been enough. The sect masters of Dragon Palace, Moon Palace, Dan Valley, and the Weapon sect had all come personally. As for the remaining forces like the Talisman sect and the Shrines, although their sect masters didn't come personally, they still sent their subordinates to congratulate them. Obviously, they didn't want to offend the Sword sect over such a small matter. Among the 10 great Ling Tian sects, only the Heavenly Policy Mansion, Heavenly Sect, and Mu Tian Mountain didn't come. Needless to say, the Heavenly Policy Mansion and Mu Tian Mountain definitely wouldn't send anyone because of their relationship with the Sword sect. As for the Heavenly Policy Mansion, it was probably because of Junwu. After all, the one in the Heavenly Policy Mansion had always been in love with Luo Xing, and Luo Xing had always only loved Junwu. Therefore, the relationship between the three of them was destined to make it impossible for Junwu and the one in the Heavenly Policy Mansion to coexist peacefully. Therefore, it was understandable that the Heavenly Policy Mansion didn't send anyone. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 2060. The leaders of many forces were present. In an instant, the influence of the Sword sect in the Great Thousand World was fully displayed. Of course, such influence was also dependent on the Sword sect's current strength. The leaders of many forces were present. In an instant, the influence of the Sword sect in the Great Thousand World was fully displayed. Of course, such influence was also dependent on the Sword sect's current strength. As the leader of the Sword sect, Xiao Qin was also surrounded by a group of leaders. For example, He Sui, who was once on par with Xiao Qin and even looked down on Xiao Qin, was now extremely respectful in front of Xiao Qin. As the leader of the Black Emperor sect, He Sui naturally came personally to participate in this grand event. Xiao Qin also personally received He Sui and arranged a place for him to stay. Both of them sat in the courtyard. Although they had not seen each other for a few years, Xiao Qin and He Sui felt that things were still the same, but people had changed. In the past, He Sui looked down on the Sword sect. However, after the Sword sect became a super first-rate force, both of them were considered to be on equal footing. At this moment, the Sword sect's strength was already above the super first-rate forces and was considered a quasi-Lingtian sect. As such, He Sui also knew that he could no longer be compared to Xiao Qin. On the contrary, Xiao Qin could be said to have more and more power in his hands. Now that he was facing someone like He Sui, Xiao Qin could be said to be more casual and relaxed. This was the change that power and status brought to people. This was actually a very normal change. After all, with the power that Xiao Qin had now, he could almost decide the life and death of He Sui and even the entire Black Emperor sect with just one sentence. Therefore, Xiao Qin naturally did not feel any pressure when he was with He Sui. On the contrary, He Sui was under a lot of pressure when facing Xiao Qin. He could no longer be as calm and casual as before. Xiao Qin looked a little uneasy, but he did not intend to make things difficult for He Sui. He took a sip of tea and said to He Sui with a smile, "Sect Master He, I think we will always be friends in the future, right?" "Yes, yes. Sect leader Xiao Chen is right," He Sui nodded and replied. The Black Emperor sect had given up on the Bajou and avoided the possibility of direct conflict with the Sword sect. The current Black Emperor sect had already moved to the distant Linzhou. As a result, there was naturally no conflict of interest with the Sword sect, and there was the possibility of becoming friends. Upon hearing He Sui's words, Xiao Chen smiled. Then, the two of them chatted for a while before Xiao Chen stood up and left. Compared to when he had just arrived in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen's dignified temperament was much stronger now. He already looked like a sect master, and he was very calm and decent when talking to the sect masters of the various forces. Xiao Chen was busy receiving the sect masters of the various forces. As for Dan Qingyang, Long Yuan, Luo Xing, and the other emperors, naturally Jun Huiao was in charge of receiving them personally. Moreover, Dan Qingyang and the others had come because of Jun Huiao. Days passed, and finally, the day of the Sword sect's grand ceremony began in the morning. Early in the morning, the Sword sect was bustling with noise and excitement. In the main square, the elders, deacons, and disciples of the Sword sect were on standby, guarding the surroundings. Now, the disciples of the Sword sect had the arrogance of a disciple of a large sect. Their figures were tall and straight, and they stood around the main square like sharp jian-yi that had been unsheathed. Soon, the people of the various forces arrived at the main square one after another. After taking their respective seats, Xiao Chen led Song Xing and the others to the front of the main square. With the appearance of Xiao Chen and the others, all the powerhouses of the Sword sect present bowed and greeted. "Greetings, sect master." Their voices were loud and confident. Hearing this, Xiao Chen waved his hand slightly. Then, surrounded by Song Xing and the other deputy sect masters, he swept his gaze across the crowd and spoke loudly. "Everyone, today is the grand ceremony of the Sword sect. On behalf of the entire Sword sect, I sincerely thank all of you for coming from afar. Taking advantage of this grand ceremony, I would like to announce two things." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone present perked up. This was the highlight of this grand ceremony. But why were there two things? Shouldn't it be related to Jun Huiao? Many people were puzzled. Seeing this, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. First of all, Nangong Guan has become a deputy sect master of the Sword sect. Family Nangong has also become a subsidiary clan of the Sword sect." First, he announced the matter of Nangong Guan and family Nangong. Hearing this, everyone present was stunned. Nangong Guan had joined the Sword sect, and family Nangong had become a subsidiary clan of the Sword sect. Everyone looked at each other. In the crowd, many people turned their gazes towards family Nangong. Facing everyone's gazes, family Nangong's ancestors nodded slightly, acknowledging Xiao Chen's words. At the same time, Nangong Guan, who was standing with Zhou Song and the others, took a step forward and cupped her hands towards everyone, acknowledging the fact that she had become the deputy sect master of the Sword sect. Another End Realm expert had joined the Sword sect. While the sect masters were envious, they didn't forget to stand up and congratulate her. The Sword sect was getting stronger and stronger. However, this wasn't the most important thing. What everyone cared about the most was the second matter that Xiao Chen was about to announce. Everyone didn't have to wait for too long. After everyone congratulated him, Xiao Chen continued. "The second matter, I'm sure everyone has already guessed it. It's about my master, Lord Emperor," Xiao Chen said slowly. Hearing this, everyone regained their spirit. This was the main event of this ceremony, and it was also what everyone was paying attention to. Everyone looked towards Xiao Chen. Under everyone's gazes, Xiao Chen finally said what everyone had been guessing but didn't dare to confirm. Xiao Chen said with a calm expression, From today onwards, my master, Lord Emperor, will join the sword sect. He will be the old ancestor of the sword sect. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud explosion that stunned everyone. At the same time, Xiao Chen shouted loudly. The disciples of the sword sect welcome the old ancestor. Along with Xiao Chen's words, many sword sect experts, including Xiao Chen himself, Song Xing, and the other deputy sect masters, cupped their hands towards the sky and bowed. Welcome, old ancestor. As soon as everyone finished speaking, Jun Wuya appeared in the sky. He was still dressed in a simple gray robe. However, facing Jun Wuya, who stood in the sky, the sect masters of the various major powers were all stunned. They had already guessed that this would happen, but when they truly faced this scene, many of them still found it hard to accept. With an emperor-level expert, it meant that from today onwards, the sword sect had surpassed ordinary powers. Even super first-rate powers like Taiqing Temple and Black Emperor sect couldn't be compared to the sword sect. It seemed like from today onwards, the 6 super first-rate powers would become the 5 super first-rate powers. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2061. Looking at Jun Wuya, who was hovering in the air, the sect masters of the major forces present all had complicated feelings. In their opinion, Jun Wuya was synonymous with a legend. Now that this legend had joined the sword sect, the sect masters found it difficult to express their feelings. Of course, the most important thing was that Jun Wuya had joined the sword sect and become the old ancestor of the sword sect. Because of Jun Wuya, the strength of the sword sect had obviously improved qualitatively. After the announcement, Jun Wuya slowly landed on the high platform in the middle of the square under the complicated gazes of the crowd. At the same time, Luo Xing, Long Yuan, Dan Qinyang, and the others also appeared. With the appearance of the sovereigns, the banquet officially began. However, during the banquet, the sect masters of the major forces present couldn't help but look at the sovereigns. After all, sovereigns were already unreachable existences for many people. Let alone coming into contact with them, they hadn't even seen them before. However, today, there were 5 sovereigns at the sword sect's grand ceremony. Such a grand occasion was rare. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. Many sect masters of the major forces took the initiative to congratulate the sovereigns. Some of them knew the deputy headmasters like Song Xing, some of them knew the sword heads, and some of them even knew the elders of Swords Gate. At this moment, everyone in the sword sect was like a moon surrounded by stars. Even the ordinary sword sect elders were clustered around the sect masters of the major forces, their faces full of pride. The sword sect was getting stronger and stronger. In this way, even an ordinary elder of the sword sect could be treated as an equal in front of the sect masters. After all, even if the sword sect elders were only in the comprehension realm, the sect masters still didn't dare to offend them too much. The banquet went on smoothly. However, at this moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared in the sky. With the appearance of this pressure, Jun Wuya and the others on the main seats all looked towards the sky. This pressure had clearly surpassed the level of the End Realm, reaching the level of the Emperor Realm. It was also because of this that no one in the Sword Gate had sensed it before. After all, an Emperor Realm expert wasn't someone those disciples could contend against. Another sovereigns had arrived, but the banquet had already begun. Who was it? Similarly sensing this terrifying aura, the expressions of everyone present changed one after another as they raised their heads to look at the sky. Under everyone's gaze, a spatial crack slowly tore open in the sky. With the appearance of this spatial crack, a handsome young man walked out from it. The young man didn't look old, but this obviously didn't represent his true age. In fact, when one reached the sovereign realm, one's appearance didn't matter anymore. Just like Jun Wuya, although he had always appeared as an old man, as long as Jun Wuya wanted to, He could change his appearance at any time. When the young man appeared, Long Yuan, who was sitting next to Jun Wuya, glanced at Luo Xing and said, "It seems like there's quite a lot of trouble." Jun Wuya, Long Yuan, Dan Qingyang, and Luo Xing all knew about your identity. When they heard Long Yuan's words, before Jun Wuya could say anything, Luo Xing already spoke with a displeased expression. "Li Xiao, what are you doing here?" Li Xiao, the mansion master of Heavenly Policy Mansion, one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, was known as the North Sea Spear Venerable. He was a genuine sovereign realm figure and was also Luo Xing's most loyal suitor. This time, the Sword Sect's grand ceremony did not invite Li Xiao. Obviously, he was the type who came uninvited. Faced with Luo Xing's cold expression, Li Xiao smiled warmly and said, "I heard that Jun Wuya is back, so I came to congratulate you." The other sovereigns in the Great Thousand World more or less knew about the matter between Li Xiao and Luo Xing. Therefore, the matter between the two was not a secret. Moreover, because of Luo Xing, Li Xiao had always been at odds with Jun Wuya. This was also not a secret. As soon as Li Xiao opened his mouth, he directly targeted Jun Wuya. Although he said that he was here to congratulate him, he didn't look like he was here to congratulate him at all. Li Xiao's purpose of coming here was self-evident. He was obviously here for Luo Xing. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, Luo Xing was about to speak when Jun Wuya stood up and pulled her back. He said indifferently, "Forget it, I'll do it myself." Jun Wuya knew that Li Xiao was deliberately targeting him. Moreover, today was the grand ceremony of the Sword Sect. Naturally, he couldn't let the Sword Sect be at a disadvantage. Otherwise, in front of so many people, not only himself, but the entire Sword Sect would probably become a laughing stock. He knew very well why Li Xiao was hostile to him, but what could Jun Wuya say in such a matter? After stopping Luo Xing, Jun Wuya looked at Li Xiao, who was in the sky, and said, "Since you're here, come down and have a drink with me." "Sure." Hearing this, Li Xiao didn't refuse and immediately nodded in agreement. As Li Xiao took his seat, the atmosphere in the hall clearly became somewhat oppressive. Luo Xing's face was gloomy, and Li Xiao was constantly targeting Jun Wuya. As for Jun Wuya, he had a calm expression from beginning to end. Jun Wuya was aware of Li Xiao's infatuation with Luo Xing. Before the two of them had become sovereigns, Li Xiao had already been pursuing Luo Xing. Unfortunately, from beginning to end, Luo Xing only had eyes for Jun Wuya. Therefore, over time, Li Xiao naturally regarded Jun Wuya as his rival in love. From beginning to end, intentionally or unintentionally, Li Xiao had been targeting Jun Wuya. In the end, Li Xiao spoke directly, and he didn't conceal his voice at all. Everyone present heard him. "Jun Wuya, you've disappeared for so many years. I wonder if your strength has regressed. Since today is the grand ceremony of the Sword Sect, and the day you become the ancestor of the Sword Sect, why don't we exchange some pointers?" Looking at Jun Wuya, Li Xiao took the initiative to propose a spar with Jun Wuya. As soon as he said this, everyone's gaze turned towards the main seat. This was a blatant provocation. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen, who was drinking with He Sui and Daoist by Song, also looked at Jun Wuya. However, Xiao Chen didn't say anything. After all, with Jun Wuya here, Xiao Chen didn't have to worry about anything. Moreover, when it came to the affairs of these sovereigns, Xiao Chen wasn't qualified to interfere. Under everyone's gaze, Li Xiao looked at Jun Wuya with a sneer. At this time, Luo Xing, who was beside him, shouted angrily in a low voice, "Li Xiao, don't go too far. You want to fight, right? I'll fight with you." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2062. Li Xiao was getting more and more out of hand, which completely infuriated Luo Xing. However, in the face of Luo Xing's anger, Li Xiao smiled nonchalantly. "How can I bear to hit you? Besides, I'm no match for you. Li Xiao was getting more and more out of hand, which completely infuriated Luo Xing. However, in the face of Luo Xing's anger, Li Xiao smiled nonchalantly. How can I bear to hit you? Besides, I'm no match for you. In front of Luo Xing, Li Xiao admitted defeat without any hesitation. He didn't look like an overbearing Emperor realm expert at all. Luo Xing gnashed her teeth in anger at Li Xiao's attitude, but there was nothing she could do. This guy was like a piece of sticky candy. She couldn't shake him off or defeat him. Although Li Xiao said that he was no match for Luo Xing knew that this was pure nonsense. Luo Xing's strength and aura were inferior to Li Xiao's, but Li Xiao never cared about this. No matter what she did in front of Luo Xing, Li Xiao wouldn't get angry. Without waiting for Luo Xing's reply, Li Xiao looked at Jun Wuya again. Seeing this, without waiting for Li Xiao to speak, Jun Wuya put down the cup in his hand and smiled bitterly. Come on, if you don't fight, I think you won't be satisfied. Jun Wuya didn't refuse, or rather, he couldn't refuse. With Li Xiao's character, if he didn't agree today, he wouldn't let the matter rest. Since that was the case, he might as well be straightforward. With that, Jun Wuya took the lead and flew up. Seeing this, Li Xiao smiled and followed closely behind. The two emperors stood in the air. Seeing this scene, the crowd couldn't help but get excited. A battle between two emperors was rare. No one made a sound, but everyone's eyes were fixed on Jun Wuya and Li Xiao, who were in the sky. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Xiao made the first move. A golden spear appeared in his hand. Being known as the North Sea Spear Venerable, Li Xiao was naturally proficient in spear arts. Without saying a word, Li Xiao directly thrust his spear at Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya's strength was strong, so even though his words were frivolous, Li Xiao did not show any mercy when he attacked. Moreover, Jun Wuya did not need him to show any mercy. The spear shot out like a dragon. As Li Xiao thrust out his spear, a huge golden dragon instantly appeared in the sky, roaring as it charged towards Jun Wuya. Is he using the coiling dragon spear technique right from the start? Looking at Li Xiao in the sky, Long Yuan muttered to himself. The coiling dragon spear technique was Li Xiao's best spear technique. It was created by him and was extremely powerful. It was obvious that Li Xiao did not have any intention of holding back against Jun Wuya. It was no wonder that he suddenly returned after disappearing for so long. Moreover, Luo Xing rushed to the sword sect as soon as Jun Wuya came back. Li Xiao must be holding back his anger. Hearing Long Yuan's words, Dan Qingyang chuckled and said, "This guy is probably holding back his anger." As he spoke, Dan Qingyang unconsciously glanced at Luo Xing. He saw Luo Xing looking at Li Xiao in the sky with a gloomy face. Obviously, he was very dissatisfied with Li Xiao's actions. However, as the person involved, Jun Wuya remained calm and relaxed in the face of Li Xiao's attack. He flicked his finger and said softly, "Go." Immediately, a black lotus appeared in front of Jun Wuya. Then, the golden dragon that Li Xiao had transformed into collided with the black lotus. Terrifying shock waves instantly spread out. Fortunately, Jun Wuya had already confined the space around the two of them. Therefore, the shock waves did not affect the people present. Jun Wuya obviously would not let Li Xiao destroy the sword sect. The dazzling light blinded everyone until they could not open their eyes. Only when the light gradually disappeared did everyone see the scene in the sky clearly. The black lotus in front of Jun Wuya did not change at all. It was still firmly protecting Jun Wuya. On Li Xiao's side, the golden dragon had completely disappeared. After this attack, Li Xiao was at a disadvantage. This was because his attack did not even break through Jun Wuya's defense. Seeing that the black lotus did not show any signs of collapsing, a strange look flashed across Li Xiao's eyes. However, he quickly pretended to be indifferent. It seems that after so many years, your longevity lotus hasn't deteriorated. Then, without waiting for Jun Wuya to reply, Li Xiao attacked again. he swept the long spear in his hand. Suddenly, golden light dyed the sky. Long spears formed by golden light shot toward Junwuya like raindrops. Facing Li Zhao's attack, Junwuya still had no intention of dodging. He even sat down cross-legged. At the same time, the black lotus in front of Junwuya slowly dissipated. It seemed like he was going to surrender. However, soon, an even larger lotus appeared below Junwuya and quickly enveloped Junwuya. This lotus was no longer black. Instead, it was vivid and lifelike. It looked like a real lotus, but its size was huge. It was a lotus that had yet to bloom, and Junwuya was firmly protected within it. As the lotus appeared, Junwuya whispered softly, "Longevity lotus bloom." After saying that, Lianhua remained motionless like a mountain in the sky, allowing Li Zhao's attack to land on him. Li Zhao's attack made everyone tremble with fear. After all, the attack of an Emperor Realm expert was not something they could withstand. No one knew if Junwuya would be able to withstand such an attack. Even Bai Song looked at Xiao Chen worriedly and asked, "What do you think?" Sect leader Xiao Chen, can Emperor Realm expert Junwuya withstand this attack? Hearing Taoist Bai Song's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "What do you think?" Xiao Chen's current strength was not enough to participate in a battle between Junwuya and Li Xiao. However, Xiao Chen had full confidence in Junwuya. As the strongest person in the Great Thousand World, Junwuya did not have an undeserved reputation. Moreover, Junwuya had once told Xiao Chen that no one in the Great Thousand World could defeat him. Junwuya was still the strongest person in the Great Thousand World. Therefore, Xiao Chen was not worried at all. After Xiao Chen's words, Li Zhao's attack slowly ended after about 10 minutes. At the same time, the lotus that Junwuya was in did not change at all. Li Zhao's previous frenzied attack could not break through Junwuya's defense at all. It could be said that Junwuya had perfectly blocked Li Zhao's attack. Seeing that his attack was perfectly blocked by Junwuya again, a dignified look flashed across Li Zhao's eyes. Junwuya's longevity lotus was even more difficult to deal with than before. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2063. Sitting in the lotus, no matter how Li Xiao attacked, he couldn't hurt Junwuya at all. Sitting in the lotus, no matter how Li Xiao attacked, he couldn't hurt Junwuya at all. Not only Li Xiao, but Long Yuan, Dan Qingyang, and the others were also slightly stunned by such a superb defensive technique. Indeed, such a defensive technique could be said to be perfect. Under the bombardment of attacks, Li Xiao didn't attack again. Facing Junwuya's longevity lotus, he knew that ordinary attacks wouldn't have any effect at all. Just as Li Xiao stopped attacking, the lotus slowly bloomed, and Junwuya's figure appeared in front of everyone once again. Junwuya's face was still calm and casual, as if he hadn't suffered any damage from the previous attack. Junwuya looked at Li Xiao with a calm expression and said indifferently, "After so many years, your strength hasn't improved at all." Hearing Junwuya's words, Li Xiao's face immediately sank. However, before he could speak, countless vines suddenly stretched out from the lotus that Junwuya was sitting cross-legged and wrapped around Li Xiao. Facing Junwuya's counterattack, Li Xiao's expression changed slightly. However, he didn't have any intention of backing down. In front of Luo Xing, Li Xiao wasn't willing to admit that he was inferior to Junwuya. The long spear in his hand danced, and rays of golden light continuously shot out. The golden light and the vines kept colliding, and for a moment, it seemed like neither side could do anything to the other. Everyone present couldn't take their eyes off the battle between the two. This was the strength of a venerable emperor. Regardless of whether it was Li Xiao or Junwuya, their attacks were far from what an End Realm expert could block. It could be said that even the slightest aftershock could cause heavy casualties to the people present. Being able to watch a battle between venerable emperors at such a close distance made everyone extremely excited. At the same time, they felt that this trip was worth it. Under everyone's gaze, Jun Wuya didn't seem to be able to do anything to Li Xiao. As Li Xiao broke the vines one by one, a smile gradually appeared on Li Xiao's face. Jun Wuya, you can't be thinking that you can take me down with these little tricks, right? Li Xiao was indeed very confident. Moreover, he was also very confident. It was indeed impossible to take him down with these little tricks. However, after hearing Li Xiao's words, Jun Wuya smiled and shook his head. That's why I said that after all these years, you still underestimated your opponent and were careless. Li Xiao and Li Xiao could be considered old acquaintances. Li Xiao had always been at odds with Jun Wuya because of the falling star incident, even after both of them had become Emperor Realm Masters. Jun Wuya knew Li Xiao's character very well. Although Li Xiao was strong, his carelessness and underestimation of his opponents was his fatal flaw. Just like now, when Li Xiao thought that he had blocked Li Xiao's attack, he began to secretly relax. Little did he know that in a battle, especially one between venerable emperors, any small mistake was enough to make one pay a huge price. As Jun Wuya's voice fell, the defeated vines around Li Xiao did not immediately dissipate. Instead, they slowly gathered into 4 black lotuses. The 4 black lotuses directly surrounded Li Xiao. At the same time, some strange black light bloomed from the black lotuses, completely blocking Li Xiao's way out. 4 lotus saints, Li Xiao said with an ugly expression as he looked at the 4 black lotuses around him. Li Xiao knew the power of this move. Moreover, once he was trapped in it, it would be very difficult to escape. He had never thought that he would be caught unknowingly. This was the reason why Jun Wuya said that he had underestimated his opponent and was careless. Li Xiao thought that he would be fine after defeating the vines. Little did he know that Jun Wuya's real killing move was waiting for him here. Everything before was just a smokescreen. Li Xiao's eyes flashed with anger. He was angry at himself for being so careless. He clearly knew that Jun Wuya was not an easy person to deal with, but he still fell into his trap. Looking at Li Xiao's gradually changing expression, Jun Wuya did not say anything more. He made a seal with his hands and shouted softly, 4 lotus saints, destroy. Following Jun Wuya's voice, black lightning appeared on the 4 black lotuses. Then, countless black lightning bolts viciously attacked Li Xiao. Facing the countless lightning bolts that came from all directions at the same time, coupled with the fact that he was trapped by the 4 black lotuses, it was impossible for Li Xiao to dodge all the lightning bolts in such a narrow space even with his strength. Even though he tried his best to dodge, Li Xiao was still hit in the end. The lightning bolts in the black lotuses were no joke. Each bolt was enough to easily kill an End Realm expert. Therefore, Li Xiao was in great pain when he was hit head-on. However, no matter what, he was still an Emperor Realm expert. His life was not in danger. However, the situation was already like this. The outcome of this battle was already clear. Even if Li Xiao had a way to break free from the 4 Lotus Saints, he probably would not be able to compete with Jun Wuya in the future. Of course, he could still escape. However, the 2 of them were not fighting to the death. There was no need to escape. It was just a spar. Li Xiao's face was filled with unwillingness. He could no longer block the attacks of the black lightning bolt. The long spear in Li Xiao's hand also emitted a dazzling golden light. Then, Li Xiao's entire body seemed to have turned into a life of its own. A huge long spear shadow appeared behind him. Spear King, destroy. With a roar, Li Xiao stabbed out with his spear. The huge long spear seemed like it was going to pierce through the sky. It collided with the countless lightning bolts around him. The golden long spear and the black lightning bolts collided. Then, Jun Wuya's 4 Lotus Saints were directly broken. However, Li Xiao did not attack again. Although he still had the strength to fight, it was enough for him to fight to this point. Looking at Jun Wuya, Li Xiao knew that after not seeing him for so many years, Jun Wuya's strength had become stronger. He was still not Jun Wuya's match. He used his killer move, Spear King Destroy, to break Jun Wuya's 4 Lotus Saints. However, Jun Wuya still had killer moves that he had not used yet. If they continued fighting, Li Xiao knew that he would be the only one who would lose. Li Xiao had no intention of attacking again. He looked at Jun Wuya and said unhappily, "I lost. I don't want to fight anymore. Let's drink." As he spoke, he did not feel the slightest bit embarrassed and returned to the high platform. He poured himself a cup of wine and drank it. Looking at Li Xiao's shameless appearance, Jun Wuya smiled. This guy was actually not a bad person. Moreover, Jun Wuya knew why Li Xiao was so infatuated with Luo Xing. Therefore, when facing this so-called love rival of Li Xiao, Jun Wuya had never treated him as an enemy. Of course, Li Xiao had never done anything to harm Jun Wuya. Begging for a monthly vote. Begging for a recommendation. Chapter 2064. Speaking of the relationship between Jun Wuya and Li Xiao, the two had known each other since they were young, including Luo Xing, because the three of them were all emperors from the same city. Speaking of the relationship between Jun Wuya and Li Xiao, the two had known each other since they were young, including Luo Xing, because the three of them were all emperors from the same city. The city of Emperor was the hometown of Jun Wuya, Li Xiao, and Luo Xing. Of course, the city of Emperor wasn't called this name in the past. It was only because 3 emperors came from the same city that it changed its name to the city of Emperor. It was hard to remember how many years ago it was. When they were young, Jun Wuya, Li Xiao, and Luo Xing were all born in the city of Emperor. Jun Wuya and Luo Xing both came from good families, while Li Xiao was an orphan, or rather, an abandoned baby. The 3 of them had shown extraordinary talent since they were young, and their cultivation speed was ridiculously fast. However, when they were young, their experiences were completely different. Jun Wuya and Luo Xing, one was known as the number 1 genius of the city of Emperor, while the other was known as the number 1 beauty. They were the center of attention since they were young. On the other hand, Li Xiao, because of his birth, although his talent was also very strong, not many people paid attention to him. In fact, when he was young, Li Xiao could be said to have tasted all the hardships in the world. It was easy to imagine the hardships a child without parents had to go through to survive. Moreover, when he was young, Li Xiao wasn't a strong cultivator. He was just a young boy who struggled to fill his stomach. Cheating and swindling were common occurrences for Li Xiao when he was young. As long as he could get food, Li Xiao would steal or cheat. Of course, if he was caught, he would inevitably be beaten. Because of this, Li Xiao, Jun Wuya, and Luo Xing grew up in completely different environments. The real intersection between Li Xiao and Luo Xing was when the 3 of them were about 10 years old. At that time, Li Xiao stole a table of dishes from a restaurant. Although it was said to be stealing, it was actually the leftovers from another table. Even so, Li Xiao was still severely beaten by the restaurant's shopkeeper. He was almost beaten to death, but fortunately, Luo Xing happened to pass by and saved Li Xiao. She even brought him home to treat him. It wasn't until Li Xiao was completely healed and left the city of Emperor that the two separated. Of course, Luo Xing saved Li Xiao not because of any romantic feelings, but because she was kind. However, this kind, Li Xiao had always kept this kindness in his heart. From then on, Li Xiao, Luo Xing fell in love with Luo Xing. Luo Xing had no feelings for Li Xiao at all. From the beginning to the end, Luo Xing only liked one person, and that was Jun Wuya. The 3 of them had a lot of history between them. Who would have thought that the 3 of them, who came from the same city, would all become emperor-level figures in the end? It could only be said that the affairs of the world were unpredictable. Seeing Li Xiao, Jun Wuya also remembered the past. In fact, Junwei had almost forgotten the things that happened when he was young because it had been too long. Almost all the people in their era had died, and the city of Emperor was no longer the same as it was in his memories. Shaking his head with a smile, Junwei also slowly landed on the high platform. Looking at Li Xiao, who was drinking unhappily, Junwei said with a smile, "You know you're not my match, but you still want to win. When have you ever won against me?" Long Yuan, Dan Qingyang, and the others knew about the relationship between Junwei, Li Xiao, and Luo Xing. Perhaps this was not a secret in the eyes of the great figures of the Great Thousand World. It was a joke, but Li Xiao was not to be outdone. Next time, I'll definitely win against you." Li Xiao didn't know how many times he had said these words, but he had never won against Junwei, not even once in a draw. Knowing Li Xiao's character, Junwei smiled and did not say anything. After drinking a glass of wine, Junwei suddenly said, "I haven't been back to the city of Emperor for a long time. I really want to find time to go back and take a look." Hearing the three words City of Emperor, Luo Xing and Li Xiao were stunned. Obviously, the three words City of Emperor held a lot of weight in their hearts. In fact, regardless of whether their childhood memories were good or bad, it was the place where the three of them were born. It recorded the beginning of their lives, and it could be said that it was the starting point of their lives. Therefore, the three of them, including Li Xiao, were reluctant to part with the City of Emperor. Although 80% of Li Xiao's childhood memories were painful, so what? Whether it was pain or happiness, it was a part of his past. It was something that he could not part with. Luo Xing was slightly taken aback, but he did not think much about it and said, "I'll go with you. What's there to miss about that place? You're crazy." Luo Xing wanted to go with them, but Li Xiao said in a bad mood. This fellow was a classic example of a dead duck being stubborn. Although he said that, his eyes revealed a deep sense of nostalgia. Junwei did not expose Li Xiao. Instead, he smiled and called Xiao Chen in front of him. He personally introduced Xiao Chen to everyone. Of course, Xiao Chen had seen everyone present before, such as Long Yuan, Luo Xing, and Dan Qingyang. Only Li Xiao and the artifact sect master, Kong Gu, were people that Xiao Chen had never seen before. Junwei personally introduced everyone to Xiao Chen. In this regard, Long Yuan was the first to speak with a smile. Previously, it was said that the city of Emperor had 3 emperors, but in this old man's opinion, you 3 brothers will not be much inferior in the future. Long Yuan's words were obviously referring to Xiao Chen, Long Qing, and Xian Yuan Ling. In Long Yuan's opinion, the 3 of them were very talented, and at least had the possibility of reaching the Emperor realm. Moreover, now that Long Qing had become his disciple, Long Yuan was confident that he could nurture Long Qing into an Emperor realm figure. Hearing Long Yuan's words, Xiao Chen cupped his hands and said humbly, "Senior, you flatter us. The 3 of us still have a long way to go." Junwei said with a smile, not feeling the slightest bit of pride because of Long Yuan's performance. Li Xiao, Xiao Chen has the sword body. Originally, the sword sect's myriad sword cave was the best place for him to cultivate the sword body. Unfortunately, the myriad sword cave has been completely destroyed. Your heavenly policy mansions. Junwei naturally did not call Xiao Chen over just to greet him. He had another request. However, after hearing Junwei's words, Li Xiao had already guessed Junwei's purpose before Junwei could finish speaking. He immediately interrupted him in a bad mood. "Stop. You still want to covet my heavenly policy secret realm? Save it, I don't agree. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2065. The Heavenly Policy Secret Realm was the #1 secret realm in the Heavenly Policy Mansion. It was of great help in stimulating a cultivator's special physique. For example, Xiao Chen's sword physique. If he could cultivate in the heavenly policy secret realm, Xiao Chen's use and control of the sword physique would become more perfect. Moreover, the heavenly policy mansion was somewhat different from ordinary sections. To put it bluntly, the heavenly policy mansion was like an academy. The disciples would graduate and leave when the time was up. It was different from ordinary sections. Once a disciple entered the heavenly policy mansion, he would stay for a lifetime. Moreover, when the heavenly policy mansion recruited disciples, it didn't matter if they belonged to a sect or not. As long as they met the requirements of the heavenly policy mansion and passed the assessment, they would be able to enter the heavenly policy mansion to cultivate. When the time was up, they would leave immediately. For a force similar to an academy like the heavenly policy mansion, the flow of people was naturally very fast. It wasn't as stable as ordinary sections. However, there was an advantage. Because so many people had entered the heavenly policy mansion to study, the heavenly policy mansion could be said to have students all over the world in the Great Thousand World. It was also because of this that the heavenly policy mansion developed. It was completely different from ordinary sections. Therefore, the heavenly policy secret realm was naturally different from ordinary sects' secret realms. Only the disciples of the sects could enter. However, in the face of Jun Wuya's request, Li Xiao rejected it without hesitation. Upon hearing this, Jun Wuya didn't mind at all. I remember that the heavenly policy mansion is going to recruit disciples soon. When the time comes, I'll let Chen register. How can you reject it when it becomes the academy of the heavenly policy mansion? Jun Wuya was very clear about the rules of the heavenly policy mansion. Moreover, the heavenly policy mansion could be said to be the #1 academy in the Great Thousand World. Many things were passed down from ancient times. Even Li Xiao wouldn't change it easily, because this was the foundation of the heavenly policy mansion. Every year, the heavenly policy mansion would recruit disciples from the outside. The number of disciples wasn't fixed. Once a disciple passed the assessment of the heavenly policy mansion, he would become a disciple of the heavenly policy mansion. At that time, he would be able to use the cultivation secret realms and cultivation resources of the heavenly policy mansion. Upon hearing Jun Wuya's words, Li Xiao immediately shouted in displeasure. "You old fox! Fine, I agree. You don't have to let your disciple join the heavenly policy mansion." Jun Wuya's words left him with no other choice. Moreover, if he really allowed Xiao Chen to participate in the heavenly policy mansion's assessment, wouldn't it be a complete mess? Xiao Chen was now considered a big shot in the great wide world. He was the sect master of the sword sect. Why would he participate in the heavenly policy mansion's assessment? Moreover, with Xiao Chen's cultivation and strength, how could the heavenly policy mansion's test stop him? At that time, wouldn't they be bullying others? Li Xiao had no choice but to agree. Upon hearing this, Jun Wuya smiled and said, "Okay, I will personally bring Qin to the heavenly policy mansion." There was no doubt that the heavenly policy secret realm was useful to Xiao Chen. Now that Li Xiao had agreed, Jun Wuya was naturally in a good mood. As he spoke, he took the initiative to pour a cup of wine for Li Xiao. However, Li Xiao was a little depressed at this moment. It seemed like he had fallen into Jun Wuya's trap again. The ceremony went smoothly until late at night. After everyone had eaten their fill, they left one after another. During this ceremony, the sword sect announced a very important matter to the outside world. Jun Wuya had become the old ancestor of the sword sect. In this way, the sword sect had a venerable emperor in charge. Regarding this, the various factions that came to participate in this ceremony were shocked. At the same time, they all changed their attitude towards the sword sect. After all, one Jun Wuya was enough to suppress them. Moreover, the sword sect already had 10 End Realm experts at the deputy sect master level. After the ceremony ended, Xiao Qin returned to his residence. Qin Shuru and the other girls didn't participate in this ceremony. As for Xian Yuanling, he was still in seclusion. Only Long Qing followed Long Yuan to participate in the ceremony with Shao Chen. After returning to his residence, Shao Chen first went to see his parents. During this period of time, the two elders had been accompanied by Luan Luan. There was no choice. Shao Chen was indeed too busy every day. It was rare for him to have any free time. When they saw Shao Chen, the two elders were naturally very happy. Of course, Luan Luan was also there. However, Luan Luan kept complaining that Shao Chen didn't come to accompany her. Regarding this, Shao Chen smiled bitterly. During this period of time, Shao Chen naturally didn't have time to care about these things when he was facing the constant threats from the Hetian sect. However, now that Jun Wuya had returned, Shao Chen could breathe a sigh of relief. However, Shao Chen was about to leave again. He would follow Jun Wuya to the City of Emperors and then to the Heavenly Policy residence. This was Jun Wuya's request. Regarding this, Shao Chen didn't reject. He told Shao Chen and Bai Ruya that he might be leaving the sword sect for a period of time. The two elders didn't say much and only told Shao Chen to be careful. On the other hand, when Luan Luan heard that Shao Chen was about to leave again, she immediately pouted in dissatisfaction. Although Shao Chen didn't spend as much time with Luan Luan after coming to the Great Thousand World, this little girl was still very clingy to Shao Chen. There was no other way. After persuading Luan Luan with great difficulty, Shao Chen returned to his courtyard to rest. After a silent night, Shao Chen accompanied his family for the entire day the next day. Of course, this included Qin Shuru and the other ladies. When they found out that Shao Chen was about to leave the sword sect again, although the ladies were somewhat reluctant, they didn't say much. After handing over the matters of the sword sect to Tsang Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and the others, early in the morning on the third day, Shao Chen, Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Xiao Xiao prepared to leave together. Luo Xing and Jun Wuya were both from the City of Emperors. This time, when she heard that Jun Wuya was going to the City of Emperors, she didn't hesitate to go with him. On the other hand, Li Xiao left after the ceremony ended. In the main hall, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and the others personally sent the four of them off. In response, Jun Wuya said somewhat helplessly, "There's nothing much to send off. However, the matters of the sword sect will require more effort." Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Zhou Song and Wu Huan respectfully nodded and replied, "Master, don't worry. This disciple will definitely take care of the matters of the sword sect." In fact, Zhou Song and Wu Huan both wanted to follow Jun Wuya to the City of Emperors, but unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity. On the other hand, because of Luo Xing, Xiao Xiao was able to successfully go to the City of Emperors with Jun Wuya. Hearing Zhou Song and Wu Huan's reply, Jun Wuya nodded slightly and then disappeared from the main hall with Shao Chen. At the same time, Luo Xing and Xiao Xiao followed closely behind. Seeing the four of them leave, Wu Huan said with some envy, "When can I be like junior brother and be able to accompany Master?" "Don't worry. Now that Master is the ancestor of the sword sect, there will be many opportunities in the future." Hearing this, Zhou Song chuckled and said, "Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2066. Both of them wanted to accompany Jun Wuya to take a look at the City of Emperor, but they also knew that once Shao Chen left, the matters of the sword sect would naturally fall to them, the deputy sect masters. Therefore, it was naturally impossible for the two of them to go with Jun Wuya. Both of them wanted to accompany Jun Wuya to take a look at the City of Emperor, but they also knew that once Shao Chen left, the matters of the sword sect would naturally fall to them, the deputy sect masters. Therefore, it was naturally impossible for the two of them to go with Jun Wuya. Jun Wuya's group of four left. Along the way, they were escorted by the two emperors, Jun Wuya and Luo Xing, so it was naturally impossible for them to encounter any danger. They safely arrived at the city of Emperor, known as the #1 city in the Great Thousand World. The scale of the city of Emperor was naturally incomparably magnificent. 3 emperors had appeared consecutively in a single city. Such a thing had never happened in other places before. It was also because of Jun Wuya's group of 3 that the city of Emperor's reputation in the Great Thousand World could be said to be known by everyone. From afar, he could see the endless buildings and the black city walls that twisted and turned like a giant dragon. The size of the city of the Emperor could be said to be the largest city Shao Chun had ever seen so far. Under the lead of Jun Wuya and Luo Xing, the 4 of them arrived outside the city gate. They had already changed their appearances in advance. Jun Wuya and Luo Xing obviously did not want to expose their identities. Otherwise, with their identities, coming to the city of Emperor would definitely cause a sensation. There was already a long queue outside the city gate. Throughout the year, cultivators from all over the Great Thousand World would gather in the city of Emperor. Some came to pay homage to the glory of the 3 emperors, while others went out to gain experience and deliberately made a detour to the city of Emperor. In any case, no matter what the reason was, almost all cultivators in the Great Thousand World had to come to the city of Emperor at least once. This seemed to have become an unwritten rule among cultivators. Following the crowd, the 4 of them paid the entrance fee and then entered the city of Emperor. Shao Chun saw 3 mountain-sized statues standing in the main square in the center of the city. Although they were still at the edge of the city, Shao Chun could clearly see the 3 statues when he raised his head. They were Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Li Xiao. The statue in the middle was obviously Jun Wuya, the one on the left was a woman, Luo Xing, and the one on the right was Li Xiao. The statues of the 3 of them had already been erected in the Emperor's city for countless years. In addition, it was said that these 3 statues were carved from 3 mountain peaks. Using an entire mountain as a statue, one could very well imagine how gigantic these 3 statues were. As long as one was in the city of emperors, no matter which direction one was in, they would be able to see these 3 statues. And these 3 statues were like emperors, overlooking everything in the city of Emperor, the vicissitudes of time. Looking at these 3 huge statues, Shao Chun could already imagine what Jun Wuya and the other 2 represented to the city of Emperor. The 3 of them were regarded as godlike existences by many cultivators in the city of Emperor. Compared to Shao Chun, Luo Xing, Jun Wuya, and Xiao Xiao were very calm. Jun Wuya and Luo Xing were needless to say. Xiao Xiao had been to the city of Emperor before, and more than once, so seeing these 3 statues again didn't have much of an impact on Xiao Xiao. Seeing Shao Chun's somewhat shocked expression, Xiao Xiao smiled and said, "How is it, junior brother? I was the same when I first came to the city of Emperor. There are many fun things in the city of Emperor." As the largest city in the Great Thousand World, the city of Emperor was naturally prosperous. Because cultivators from all over the world gathered here, there were many novel things in the city of Emperor. Given Xiao Zhao's personality, she was naturally very interested in these novel things. Hence, in this trip to Emperor City, the person who was the most excited was undoubtedly Xiao Xiao. Looking at Xiao Xiao, whose eyes were beginning to shine, Shao Chun smiled slightly. His 4th senior sister was really like a child who couldn't grow up. Xiao Xiao couldn't wait to go to the city of Emperor to play, but Luo Xing and Jun Wuya didn't object. But before that, the 4 of them still found an inn and rested for a while. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Shao Chun left the inn under Xiao Zhao's lead. Xiao Xiao seemed to be very familiar with the city of Emperor. After all, she had been here more than once before. On the crowded streets, Shao Chun strolled leisurely under Xiao Zhao's lead. The city of Emperor was indeed worthy of being known as the #1 city in the Great Thousand World. There were indeed many good places in the city of Emperor. The largest auction venue in the Great Thousand World, the largest underground black market, the largest martial arena, and of course the largest brothel. As long as it was something in the Great Thousand World, one could find it in the city of Emperor. Moreover, because the city of Emperor gathered cultivators from all over the Great Thousand World, the martial Tao here was also extremely prosperous. Different cultivators gathered here, which naturally created the unique culture and style of the city of Emperor. And in the city of Emperor, what Xiao Xiao liked the most was the martial arena. In the martial arena, cultivators from all over the Great Thousand World gathered. There were cultivators of all ages and cultivation levels. This could be said to be a paradise for cultivators. Anyone could come up to the stage to exchange pointers, and even fight to the death. Of course, the winner would also receive generous rewards from the martial arena. Therefore, almost every day, the martial arena of the city of Emperor could be said to be a boiling cauldron of voices. Under Xiao Zhao's lead, the two of them quickly arrived at the martial arena. It was located in the northwest corner of the city of Emperor, but it occupied a large area. There was a huge black palace, which was the beast battle arena of the city of Emperor. According to Xiao Xiao, the masters behind the beast battle arena of the city of Emperor were the Moon Palace and the Heavenly Policy Mansion, as well as the other two of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. The martial arena was jointly created by the 4 great Ling Tian sects, so naturally, no one dared to cause trouble. At the same time, with the 4 great Ling Tian sects as backing, the martial arena of the city of Emperor became the #1 martial arena in the Great Thousand World. Xiao Xiao had been here before. As he pulled Xiao Chen to the entrance, he kept introducing the place excitedly. Little junior brother, this martial arena is very interesting. Anyone can sign up for it. If you win, there will be generous rewards, and you don't have to worry about your identity being exposed. There was no need to worry about one's identity being exposed in the martial arena because anyone who entered the martial arena of the city of Emperor would wear a mask. This mask was unique to the martial arena of the city of Emperor. Not only could it conceal one's appearance, but it could also block the detection of divine consciousness. Therefore, if one wore a mask, others would naturally not know one's identity. Moreover, wearing a mask was a unique rule of the city of Emperor's martial arena. No matter who it was, if they wanted to enter the martial arena of the city of Emperor, they would have to wear a mask. Of course, they would also have to pay a large entrance fee. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Unfortunately, with the rise of the sword sect over the years, there were now dozens of sword heads. Moreover, looking at the person's cultivation, he should have just broken through to the Tao realm. Moreover, he was wearing a mask, so Xiao Chen couldn't identify him. Hearing Xiao Zhao's words, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Should be. However, it seems like he's going to lose. The person he's fighting should be an expert from the Saber sect." Xiao Xiao smiled and said, "The Saber sect was one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. It could be said that they had always been rivals of the Sword sect. When the Sword sect was at its peak, the Saber sect and the Sword sect had always been at odds. There were even experts from the Saber sect who said that sabers and swords were like fire and water. In the Great Thousand World, the number of sword cultivators and saber cultivators was undoubtedly the largest. The Sword sect and the Saber sect were once sacred grounds for sword cultivators and saber cultivators respectively. Naturally, it was inevitable that there would be conflicts. However, compared to the Heavenly sect, the people from the Saber sect couldn't be considered as rivals. After all, the purpose of the Saber sect was only to prove that saber cultivators were stronger than sword cultivators and not to destroy the Sword sect. Therefore, after the Sword sect fell from its pedestal, the Saber sect no longer targeted the Sword sect. In other words, in the eyes of the Saber sect, the fallen sword sect was no longer qualified to compete with them. Therefore, they directly chose to ignore the sword sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2068. In the eyes of the Saber sect, following the decline of the sword sect, the battle between the sword sect and the sword sect had come to an end. The Saber sect no longer had the right to compete with the Saber sect, and the Saber sect no longer cared about the sword sect. However, in recent years, following the rise of the sword sect, the battle between the sword sect and the Saber sect seemed to have reached a limit. Neither side was willing to acknowledge the other, so naturally, a battle was unavoidable. Xiao Chun had heard a little about the Saber sect. At this moment, looking at the two people fighting fiercely in the arena, it was just as Xiao had said. The expert from the sword sect was about to lose. Both of their cultivations were at the beginning of the Dao realm, but the expert from the sword sect had clearly not broken through to the Dao realm for a long time, so he was inferior to the expert from the Saber sect in all aspects. As a result, his defeat was only a matter of time. What Xiao Chun didn't know was that this expert from the Sword Gate was actually just an elder of the Sword Gate. This time, he had only broken through to the Dao realm during his training outside. His cultivation base hadn't completely stabilized yet, which was why he came to the battle arena in the city of Monarch. He wanted to stabilize his cultivation base through battle, but who would have thought that his first opponent would be someone from the Saber sect? He was only an elder of the Sword sect and had not been promoted to Sword Head. As a result, Xiao Chun naturally did not affect him much. After all, there were over 100 elders in the Sword sect now. Just as Xiao had said, as time passed, the elder from the Sword sect was indeed at a disadvantage. At this moment, he could only defend with all his might, and it was very difficult for him to find an opportunity to counterattack. As a result, his defeat was only a matter of time. On the other hand, the expert from the Saber sect seemed to be unwilling to give up. With a saber in hand, his aura was extremely domineering. The saber in his hand continued to slash down, and each strike was stronger than the last. In the end, the elder of the sword sect had used all his strength, but the saber master still managed to break through his defense. Immediately, the entrance to the cave was wide open, and the saber master took advantage of this opportunity to slash down again. The elder from the sword sect was clearly unable to resist this strike. The strike struck his chest viciously, causing blood to spurt out. At the same time, the expert from the saber sect directly kicked out, sending the elder to the ground. That wasn't all. After the outcome of the battle was decided, the expert from the saber sect didn't let the elder from the sword's gate go so easily. He stepped forward and ruthlessly stomped on the injured elder from the sword's gate. Even through the mask, one could see the fragrant snow coming out of the elder's mouth. However, the injuries on his body were nothing. What made the elder from the sword sect unable to endure was that he was being stepped on. He tried his best to struggle, but unfortunately, he was already injured. How could he be a match for the expert from the saber sect? The expert from the saber sect sneered as he firmly stomped on the chest of the sword sect elder. He did not hide his voice at all and even deliberately used his spiritual energy to let everyone in the arena hear him clearly. The sword sect? Ha, a sect that has already fallen from the altar, what are you still doing? Do you think that you can be arrogant just because you defeated the heavenly sect? I'll tell you the truth. My saber sect has never placed the sword sect in our eyes. We did and we still do. Don't think that you can compete with my saber sect just because you've improved a little. Sabers are the mainstream of the great 1,000 domains. The battle between the saber sect and the sword sect was a battle between the saber sect and the sword sect. It had always been like this. However, the words of the expert from the saber sect were clearly humiliating the entire sword sect. Hearing this, the elder from the sword sect unwillingly shouted, "Humph, I'm just an elder from the sword sect. As for you, although I don't know your identity, you're definitely an elder from the saber sect. What's there to be arrogant about defeating me? If you have the ability, then challenge the sword head of my sword sect." The saber elder was like the sword head of the sword sect. The lowest cultivation level one could hold the position was the Tao realm. This expert from the saber sect was indeed an elder from the saber sect. However, he was ranked at the bottom of the saber sect's saber elders. However, when he heard the words of the sword sect's elder, the expert from the saber sect's face darkened. A fierce glint flashed across his eyes. Then, he exerted force on his foot and said coldly, "Don't worry, I'll go and meet your sword sect's sword head when the time comes. I heard that the little kid from your sword sect has already broken through to the Tao realm. I wonder if your sword sect will still have the face to support the holy land of sword cultivators if I defeat him. Ha ha." As he spoke, the expert from the saber sect laughed out loud. However, when he heard this, the sword sect elder under his foot struggled frantically. His eyes were filled with anger as he shouted, "Impudent! You're courting death. How dare you humiliate my sword sect's master?" As an elder of the sword sect, he naturally couldn't allow someone to humiliate his sword sect's master to his face. One must know that Xiao Chen's current status didn't only represent himself. He also represented the entire sword sect. However, while these two disciples were chatting, they did not know that although the sword sect elders were not in Emperor City, the sect leader of the sword sect was present. Moreover, he was prepared to personally make a move. 2 hours passed very quickly. After the saber sect powerhouse consumed an elixir and adjusted his breathing for a while, he had completely adjusted his condition. He walked up to the arena again. At the same time, in the private room on the other side, the maidservant who had been serving Xiao Chen said, "Sir, it's your turn to go up." Hearing this, Xiao Chen calmly stood up and walked out of the private room. Although his steps looked simple, he had already appeared in the arena with just one step. Both of them were wearing masks, so neither of them knew the other's identity. At this moment, the saber sect powerhouse saw Xiao Chen and said in an indifferent tone, "Come, I hope you're stronger than that trash just now." At this moment, the saber sect powerhouse was still speaking arrogantly and humiliating the sword sect. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not get angry. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. "I shouldn't be weaker than that trash from the saber sect." As soon as Xiao Chen said this, a chill instantly exploded from the saber sect powerhouse. Then, he looked at the dustless sword in Xiao Chen's hand and spoke in a cold tone. "You're also from the sword sect? Heh, looks like you people from the sword sect really don't know what's good for you. You haven't learned your lesson yet and now you dare to send someone to court death?" Based on the sword in Xiao Chen's hand, the saber sect powerhouse had already guessed that Xiao Chen was probably from the sword sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.